Morning, everyone. I'm Councillor Susie Horton. I'm Chair of the Planning Committee. Welcome to everyone to the meeting. A little bit of housekeeping and safety information to start off with. If the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room and public gallery. No one's up there at the moment. By the stairwells, don't use the lifts, and assemble at Queen Victoria's statue in Guildhall Square. And if you did sign in today, please sign out for the fire regulations. Regarding live web streaming, limited public seating has been available. However, this meeting is also being webcast to allow the public to watch remotely. Hello, anyone who's watching. Everyone speaking via microphone will be on camera, except those people on my right-hand side. So if you want to be on a camera, you would need to move to the seats at the back. Please can everyone speaking use the microphones and remember to switch them off when they finish. For those of you who have not been to a meeting here, you don't have to hold your finger on the button. You can just press it and release it and then do the same at the end of your speaking time. Regarding voting, when voting, please can members of the committee keep their hands raised clearly until the number of votes have been stated. So, some introductions around the room. So I will start with the committee, and I'm going to start this side. So please introduce yourself.
Morning, Chair. Councillor Mary Vallely, Vice Chair.
Morning, Chair. Councillor Joe Standen for Paulsgrove Ward.
Good morning, Chair. Councillor Matthew Cordy, Member for Hillsey.
Morning, Chair. Councillor Carlin for Cobner and Anchorage Park.
Peter Canlish, Eastern Craneswater, standing in for Councillor Denise Perry, St Jude.
Gerald Vernon Jackson, Milton Ward. Welcome
to the committee. Thank you very much. So I will now introduce anyone doing a deputation. If you're sitting supporting someone and you're not going to speak, you don't need to introduce yourself. So I'm assuming the two people to my right are doing a deputation. If you could just introduce yourself using the mic and say which agenda item that you're speaking on.
Alex Tomczynski, and I'm the applicant for 38 Manners Road. Thank you.
My name is Simon Hill, and I am speaking on behalf of the applicant for 46 New Road East and 92 Gladys Avenue.
Okay, for members, the speaking on New Road East has been a last request, which I have agreed to, but if you can try and make sure that requests to speak are done in good time in future, that would be very useful. Okay, over to the back.
Good morning, everyone. Councillor Stuart Brown. I'm a Fratton Ward councillor, and I'm here to speak on item 4, 46 New Road East.
I'm Ruth Warlow. I'm the neighbour of 46 New Road East.
Councillor Russell Simpson for Hillsey Ward, reading for 92 Gladys Avenue.
Okay. Welcome to all those people who are doing deputations, and last but not least, the council officers. So I'll start with you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Jane Didino, Local Democracy Officer.
Simon Turner, Team Leader in the Planning Department.
Morning, Chair. David Hodges, Head of Development Management.
So welcome to them. Today we don't have a legal person because they are not well. So, but I understand that the committee, I've checked that the committee can go ahead without that. Okay, so just a bit of clarification around the proceedings for those people who've not been here before. What will happen is when we get onto the substantive items, there will be a presentation by one of the officers, which will reflect the report, which has been published. There's then time for deputations, which are done in a specific order, which is objections and then agents and then finally councillors. And so people will have up to 6 minutes to speak on those. Then what happens, that is the end of people doing deputations. There is no two-way conversation after that. That's your bit. And then it's back to the committee, and the members of the committee can ask council officers questions, clarification, and then make comments, and then finally make a proposal, and we have voting. and which will result in planning permission either being granted or refused. Okay. So, next item is apologies for absence. We've had, as Councillor Candlish has said, that apologies from Councillor Denise Perry, and Councillor Candlish is deputising for her, standing in. And we've also had apologies from Councillor Lee Hunt, who is on leave. And I believe that's all the apologies that I've had.
I talked to Councillor Hugh Mason last night, and he's not at all well.
Yes, so Councillor Mason, actually I did know that as well, that he wasn't well. So thank you for reminding me, Councillor Vernon Jackson. Okay. So I think that's it on the apologies. Declarations of interest. Does anyone have any declarations of interest? Just for information, I am speaking on 2 items where I will come out of the chair because I think I've had conversations with residents in my ward which would be quite good evidence that I had predetermined it if I was sitting in the chair. So I'm going to come out, and we'll probably do some reordering of the agenda so that the vice chair can step in for those agenda items which we'll put to further down. Okay.
Chair, the paperwork says that I think you are speaking on 3.
Yes, it does say that.
And do we need to correct that?
No.
Lovely.
Thank you. I'll explain when I get nearer to it. Thank you. So the next, are there any other declarations of interest? Sorry. Okay, so the next item is the minutes from the previous meeting for those people who were here, and that wasn't me, although I was watching from home. Ill in bed. Anyone here who was here happy to propose them as accurate? Thank you. Thanks very much. Maybe, I don't know who will sign those. Yeah. Yeah, is there seconded? Thank you, Jay. Right. So we'll have to work out who signs those. One of you will sign those as accurate. Okay, I think that is all of those items, so we can get on to the first substantive item, which is item number 4, 46 New Road East, Portsmouth. Here we go. I think it's David presenting. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. We'll just get the presentation up. Yes, so 46 New Road East, and the application is for a change of use of the existing C3 dwelling house to a mixed use, falling either within Class C3 or as a house in multiple occupation Class C4. So property that you see on the right-hand side in the aerial and in the OS location plan edged in red there. So mid-terrace property with facing north onto the street, and to the bottom what you can see is the Fratton Cemetery. So aerial view of the shot, so on the rear of the property highlighted there, and you can see the existing rear outshot and the rear garden to the property. There's property in the street scene, as you can see, typical of the surrounding neighbouring dwellings. So in relation to your mix and balance communities test, we've investigated the surrounding properties within a 50-metre radius, and there are 2 existing HMOs highlighted, which are the purple diamonds that you can see there. So were this property to be granted, that would take us to 3 out of the 73 properties, so 4.1% below your 10% threshold for mix and balance communities. The existing floor plans shown there, fairly typical layout, and then on the elevations, again, very typical for the surrounding properties. So in terms of the proposals, the property will be extended under permitted development with the rear extension and a loft conversion. What that will create, going from ground floor upwards, is 2 ensuite rooms on the ground floor room, communal kitchen dining room to the rear with the rear extension added on. The first floor, what we'll have is 2 ensuite rooms plus a further separate bathroom, because on the top floor, so we've slightly cut off the end of bedroom 6, it does end. Apologies for that. That's an ensuite room, but there is no ensuite to bed 5, and they would use that separate bathroom on the floor below. Just to show you how those alterations to the property would take place, so there's shown both the loft conversion, roof lights to the front to provide the roof rooms, and then the ground floor extension to the rear. Cross-section through, which shows how the ceiling heights will be provided for the rooms to meet the standards in the licensing requirements. Just in terms of layout, so there's space for a bike store to the rear of the property, bins to be stored in the forecourt as existing, and that plan shows you where the rear extension would be added, and a satisfactory garden space for the proposed occupiers. Just some photos of the property, yet to be any works to take place at the site currently. There's no updates in the SMAT chair in relation to this application. Having examined it against our policies and our guidance, we're satisfied it complies, and therefore we recommend the application for approval.
Thank you, David. So we'll now come on to the deputations, and the first deputation is from Mrs. Warlow. You have up to 6 minutes. I'll give you a bit of warning when you get towards that if you need it.
Good morning, Chair and committee members. I'm here representing 29 objectors, a ward councillor and 73 residents of our community petition. We have served this council with a formal statutory notice of risk and liability. This is a legal warning of structural, environmental and public safety failure if you approve 46 New Road East. We have been told that this is a democratic process, yet before even stepping into this room today, we have been repeatedly told that this decision has already likely been made. I ask you, what is the purpose of a public consultation if the outcome is predetermined? If the committee is merely rubber stamping unsafe, flawed developments, democracy in Portsmouth is dead. I've been forced to formally serve notice to Southern Water, Portsmouth City Council and the Hampshire and Isle of Wight and Fire Rescue Service for the basic public safety to be considered. Why? Because the developer did not wait for your democratic process. They began unauthorised retrospective excavation on site in March. The committee must not reward cowboy tactics that gamble with human lives. Compounding this is a total lack of transparency. The documentation is riddled with severe irregularities. Original plans were added retrospectively on the 1st of July, despite being backdated to the 15th of May. Worse still, these plans depict a 3-bedroom home with no bathrooms or toilet. What is the developer hiding? Let us be clear, submitting incorrect or misleading architectural plans is a direct breach of the UK planning validation rules. This deceptive practice actively undermines local democracy, prevents proper statutory consultation and renders any subsequent safe evaluation legally void. Submitting truthful documentation will expose the real scale of what is being proposed, the extreme, unsustainable overdevelopment of a modest family dwelling. Do not allow the applicant's agent to tell you that these are purely building regulation matters. Under the National Planning Policy Framework, you hold a duty of care. If an application relies on deceptive, inaccurate plans, it cannot legally or safely be implemented, and your planning duty is to refuse today. The developer claims to provide premium housing. In reality, this layout forces 6 independent adults into a single mid-terrace house, squeezing the rear garden into a claustrophobic brick alleyway. This is exploitative, dangerous overdevelopment. I live directly next door. In my own property, 5 adults share just 1 family bathroom. We are already at absolute capacity. We physically cannot find the space to add a single extra toilet, let alone 6 independent en-suites this developer intends to jam into similar dimensions next door. To pretend these fragile Victorian terraces can absorb that density is a fantasy. We urge you to refuse this application based on 5 critical material planning considerations. This Victorian terrace sits on unstable marshland with shallow, fragile brick footings. Converting it into a high-density 6-bed HMO vastly multiplies the structural dead load. Let us not forget the catastrophic collapse at 25 Langford Road, where a mid-terrace Portsmouth home completely caved in due to failing brickwork. Our photographic evidence already shows severe lateral bowing along the shared garden party wall. To prove this layout based on flawed plans without a prior independent structural assessment blindly invites a repeat disaster. This layout is a fire safety trap. Under approved document B, there is only one exit, the front door. Because the rear garden is now a narrow brick alleyway, the rear is completely landlocked by private land. If a fire starts in the communal kitchen, occupants upstairs are trapped. Under Planning Gateway 1, fire safety layout is an upfront material planning consideration. Furthermore, cutting into shared walls without certified fire stopping means a next door fire will breach my home via the uncompartmented Victorian loft void in minutes. We have issued a formal notice under Section 82 of the Environmental Protection Act. Our shared brickwork is already under extreme moisture stress. Packing 6 independent household and 6 unvented ensuite showers directly against shared walls will trap moisture in porous 19th century brickwork, driving toxic damp into neighbouring homes. Protecting residential amenity from cross-boundary environmental hazards is a foundational purpose of the planning system. The single-layer brick wall offers zero sound insulation, meaning multi-directional noise will completely destroy our habitable amenity, breaching approved document E. Furthermore, our local sewer network consists of legacy Victorian clay pipes. Multiplying water discharge by 6 risks foul water flooding into neighbouring properties, breaching approved document H. Portsmouth local planning policies dictate that intensification must not outstrip existing infrastructure. Granting permissions before Southern Water conducts full network capacity checks is a severe failure of the process. The invasive work starts prematurely in March, actively risks disturbing historical Artex walls and ceilings, threatening to release toxic asbestos fibres into shared structural voids. Because this is a mid-terrace property with interconnected roof voids, this layout presents an immediate hazard to adjacent families. This committee has the full authority to refuse this layout or at the bare minimum defer it until a certified intrusive asbestos survey is submitted. Chair, Portsmouth Article 4 direction has strict 10% density rule exists to protect communities from this exact type of dangerous exploitive overdevelopment. If you approve the application today based on inaccurate, backdated layout plans and without demanding full network checks from Southern Water, a certified asbestos survey, a comprehensive fire risk assessment and an independent structural report, you do so with full documented prior knowledge of these existential risks. Building regulations check the details after the fact, but you dictate whether the intensification is safe in principle. If you vote to approve a layout that cannot physically be made without destroying the adjacent homes, you accept the liability. Prove to the residents in this room that our local democracy is real and not a sham. Uphold your duty of care and refuse this application. Thank you.
I think practice that. 3 seconds over. Thank you very much. Well done. Okay, thank you very much for that deputation. So the next person to speak is Simon Hill on behalf of the applicant. You have up to 6 minutes.
Good morning. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak to you. First of all, there's a couple of responses I want to make to what's previously been said. All of the works, as you've already heard, for this particular property are being completed under permitted development. So just to be 100% clear, no planning permission is required for any of the works that are being carried out to this property. The only thing that requires planning permission is for the occupation of this property by 3 or more unrelated individuals, i.e. for it to be an HMO. The family next door that mentioned that there's 5 adult occupants living in the property could, if they wanted to and chose to, do exactly the same works to their property without any planning permission whatsoever. They would only need building regulations. So the works don't require planning, only the change of use. And as exemplified by the fact there's 5 adult occupants of the property next door, I don't believe, and the planning law doesn't believe, that this would be an over-intensification of the use of the property, and nor does a planning officer, because simply put, there is, in many, many, many streets and houses in Portsmouth, a very similar, same, or more number of people living in family homes as there are in small 6-bed HMOs like this one. This property could actually be a 7-bed HMO. The reason for the delay between purchasing the property and coming to planning committee is because we did originally do plans for this to be a 7-bed property. I say that only because we have genuinely taken on board the advice, the guidance, the requests, etc. of the planning officers and also of members of the committee over the last 5 or 6 years that I've been coming to these meetings. And with this particular property, it makes so much more sense to provide a better standard of living by having bigger bedrooms. So you'll notice 2 of the bedrooms are around 13 square metres than it does to have more compliant but smaller bedrooms. And therefore we have genuinely tried to look at what the best option is for the tenants of the property within this property in the plans that we have submitted. I'm not sure what the discrepancy that's being mentioned is in terms of plans, but ultimately plans were submitted for this property. I believe that the plans are accurate, and there's been a visit to the property to confirm that that's the case. Ultimately, every single planning requirement for this property is met in terms of its conversion to an HMO. There is no planning needed for the works, only for the occupation, and all of the works are done under permitted development. All of the works will comply with building regulations, and there is a building regulations application in process for this property. Similarly, there will be a fire risk assessment carried out at the end of this property. Part of the building regulations requirements will alleviate, I believe, the concerns that the other deputant had in terms of the compartmentalising in terms of fire, the fireboarding around the steels, the insulation in terms of the neighbouring property, etc., etc. Ultimately, it's very, very simple with this property. It's a super compliant scheme. All of the bedrooms are above the minimum size, some of them fairly significantly by 25-30%. All of the en-suites are above the minimum size. The communal area is well above the minimum size. The number of HMOs within the 50-metre radius is well below the maximum of 10%, including this property. So it is a fully compliant HMO. There is no sandwiching of other properties between 2 HMOs, and there is no more than 2 HMOs in a row, which are the acid tests for this council. The housing regulations and transport departments haven't had any concerns with this particular property, and the officer's report is for his recommendation for approval. Thank you very much for listening to my deputation.
Thank you. And last but not least, Councillor Stuart Brown, you have up to 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and my apologies if I appear a little discomforted. My allergies are playing up something chronic today, so please bear with me. I'm here today to voice not only my own objection to this application, but also to represent the concerns of numerous residents who have reached out to me. Before addressing the planning issues directly, I would like to draw attention to the significant response from and concerns of local residents, as very clearly explained by Mrs. Warlow. Over 24 have submitted objections, and a petition has been received from local residents with over 70 signatures. For any members of the committee not familiar with New Road East, the entire road has around 90 houses, and with some signatures from residents of other nearby streets, this represents a significant proportion of people who will be affected by this application. While I recognise that planning decisions must be made on material planning considerations rather than the number of representations received, the strength of local feeling should not be overlooked and reflects genuine concerns about the impact this development would have on the surrounding community. These concerns include the general character of the area, the historic context of post-war reconstructions, and most worryingly, the possibility that the application has been reused and recycled from a nearby conversion at 57 New Road East, making assumptions about this property that do not reflect reality. And I would draw your attention especially to the written submissions from Mr. and Mrs. Warlow, who outline in some detail the concerns regarding this, particularly in point 19 of their submission. I note that another application later in the agenda has been withdrawn for similar reasons. Moving on, I wish to highlight several material considerations that I believe the application falls short of addressing in full. My first concern is the impact on neighbouring residential amenity. A 6-bedroom HMO occupied by unrelated individuals will generate significantly greater levels of activity than a family home, with more frequent comings and goings, increased use of both indoor and outdoor space compared to a family, and high levels of day-to-day noise. The cumulative effect of these changes will materially reduce the quiet enjoyment of neighbouring properties. Second, the bin storage arrangements are another important consideration. The proposal substantially increases the intensity of occupation from what it has been before, but does not provide any additional bin storage. The application states explicitly that the existing arrangement will remain, an arrangement that, while suitable for a family house, would not be sufficient for 6 unrelated occupants. This level of occupation will inevitably produce considerably more waste in a single household, and without adequate storage capacity, there is an increased risk of overflowing bins and waste accumulation. The third concern I'm highlighting is the impact on traffic and parking. Despite the provision of bike storage, there is no guarantee that residents in an HMO will forego car ownership in favour of a bicycle. The recent introduction of a residents' parking zone in the area in response to public demand demonstrates the issues already being faced by people in the area, pressures that will be compounded by this development. Finally, I would ask the committee to consider the size of the proposed bedrooms. Although the application describes the accommodation as 6 single occupancy rooms, 2 of the proposed rooms would be large enough under our own regulations to accommodate 2 people, specifically bedrooms 4 and 5. While I would hope the application is refused, if and only if the committee is minded to approve the application, I would ask that a condition be imposed limiting each bedroom to occupation by a single person. I would also urge the committee to scrutinise bedroom 5 in particular, which is proposed on the new 3rd floor to be built in the eaves, and specifically whether the usable floor space in the room meets the 75% at 2.3 metre height requirement, given the sloping front of the skylights. The plans don't actually make it particularly easy to calculate that floor space with the angle of the slope of where the skylights are to be installed. For these reasons, I do not believe the development proposed is suitable, and I ask the Planning Committee to refuse the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Way within your time. Excellent. Right. Okay, that brings us to the end of the deputations. So it's over to the committee for questions first, please, before comments and proposals. Any questions from the committee? Councillor Vernon-Jackson.
Sorry, I have quite a few.
That's fine. That's what this bit's for.
So, could I ask the colleagues behind me, there's been concern raised about the building works that have happened. Does the developer have to get planning permission to do that, or are they just allowed to do it as they wish?
Thank you, Chair. So the planning application is for the change of use of the property, and the alterations to the dwelling as shown are permitted development, so they don't need planning permission, but they would need building regs approval.
So anything we do today won't make any effect on what physically happens at that property?
Well, they have a fallback in that they can build those alterations. Whether they would want to if they didn't secure the planning permission for a HMO is a different matter, but ultimately they can go ahead and build those extensions, yeah.
Okay. There's been concern raised in terms of fire risk to neighbouring properties. What is the view, because we're not experts in this, what is the view of the fire service about that?
So on an application like this, we wouldn't have a requirement to consult with them. The matters
David, do you or do you not have a duty to consult fire service? I just didn't catch the word.
We don't, sorry. So in relation to the type of application, we don't have a requirement to consult with the fire service for this type of application. Those matters of fire safety, escape, etc., the use of the materials, fire retardants, are all matters that would be dealt with at the building regulation stage, Chair.
Okay, and there was concern raised about the sewer capacity. What was the view of Southern Water, because they are the people who are in charge of the sewers?
Again, it's not a scheme in which we would be required to consult with Southern Water. We've explored this in refusals at appeal, and the very clear advice is that the requirement is for the water company to provide adequate freshwater and foul water disposal for the site. It's their responsibility, and so it's not a planning matter for us in relation to this application.
There was concern raised that the plans that you have been looking at and are on the website are not accurate. What is your view, David?
So I haven't been pointed to what particularly was inaccurate with them. We've been out on site. My officers have been to the site. As you can see, they've been inside the building as well. We're not aware of what's considered to be inaccurate with the plans. In the absence of a specific aspect that's supposed to be inaccurate with the plans, I'm afraid I can't help further.
Okay. The concern was raised that the bedroom 5 in particular has not got enough space that is above the regulated, so you can enough space that you can stand up in.
Yes, I'll just take you to the cross section, Chair. So it's a top right room. So you can see the full ceiling height at 2.3 there. That extends back to that door, and in actual fact beyond where that door is shown, because there's a further recess. So all of that is at full head height. The line, the bottom line, hang on, I've got to get this right. That's more than 75% of the room, because that's what we've measured, and that's comfortably provides the space that the occupier would need. And also it's still usable space, even going down to where the line is shown down by the roof lights, because that can accommodate a desk, chest drawers, etc.
But David, can I ask, is the bit underneath the roof light, which is lower, is that counted within the space that is in the report to say the room is of an approvable size?
I'll get you to the standard in the HMO SPD. Sorry, just 2 seconds. I'm just getting the exact wording from the document. So I can never remember it off the top of my head.
And David, you're very, very faint.
Yeah, I was about to say that.
Sorry,
you are very softly spoken.
And I am old and deaf.
Can you just speak more directly into the mic?
Will do.
Thank you.
Let me just find, because I was looking away at the same time. Apologies. Okay. I've lost a bit in there. That's fine. Yeah. Apologies. Yes. Sorry. I was just clarifying. It's from my memory that in terms of that 75% guidance, that's in the licensing's remit to consider. So that would be something that licensing would need to address when the applicant needs to go for licensing to property as a HMO.
But David, to come back to my question, is there within bedroom 5 enough space to meet our standards where it is high enough to be measured? I think it's a yes or no answer. Thank you. 2 more quick questions. A concern was raised by the neighbour that if there was a fire that and people couldn't get to the front door, there is no safe access except out into what would remain of the garden. Is that something we can look at as a planning decision?
No, again, you're in the realms of the building regs in terms of means of escape and the issues of fire doors, etc., which will limit the spread of fire in an event of a fire.
Okay, and finally, in the last paragraph of the deputation, it says building regulations check the details after the fact, but you dictate whether this intensification is safe in principle. Is that correct in planning law? Are we are we allowed to say that this intensification is too much or not?
So firstly, it's not correct in terms of building regulations checking after the fact. So there's two methods to deal with building regs, either a full plans approval or a building notice. But in effect, those alterations all have to be signed off by the building regs colleagues to make sure that they are compliant. The issue is for you to consider, is there any reasonable doubt that we could accommodate the number of people shown against our space standards in the HMO, so we don't refer within our HMO guidance to the issues of fire risk because they're dealt with by building regs. So it's a matter for that process rather than the planning today.
Thank you.
Thank you for your questions. You've ticked off 4 of mine. So are there any remaining questions? I expect the committee were planning on asking similar questions, but thank you. Councillor Inman.
Thank you, Chair. Can we just bring up a photograph of the front of the house, please? Okay, thank you, Chair.
Sorry, I was just writing something down before I forgot it. Have you asked your question? That was it. Okay. Sorry, Councillor Cordy.
Thank you, Chair. Could we bring up the map of the 50-metre radius, please? Thank you. It's a general question, really. I was wondering if the officers could tell me a little bit more about how they decide where the blue dot is, where the centre of the 50-metre radius is measured from. We've seen in the past they can be sort of centralised in the house itself, centralised on the property boundary. So I'd just like to see, is there a specific way that the officers choose that central marking point?
I believe it's the front door.
Yes, yeah, it's the centre of the front elevation of the property. So measuring the distance of that property, say it's 5 metres wide, so in that centre point of the front elevation, not the front boundary, the front elevation of the property itself.
That's great, thank you.
Any other questions? No. Do we have on the diagram, on the plans, do we have any sense of the outdoor space? So this comes up quite a lot, is the balance between needing to expand the property to allow for the shared space to meet our space standards, and then ironically increasing the number, because you're increasing the number of bedrooms, you reduce the amenity of the outside space. And I can recall at least one application where the remaining outdoor space was deemed inadequate given the necessity for the bike storage, and I wondered whether officers had considered that.
Yes, we do consider that each time, and I believe it was at the previous meeting, Chair, that we considered an application where we had previously refused and won an appeal on the basis of a HMO having inadequate outdoor space. Interestingly, in relation to that application, the response from the applicant was to reduce the overall numbers, reduce the size of the rear extensions so that they had greater garden space. I'm conscious we won that appeal on the basis of a larger HMO. I believe that was eight or 9 people, and this one is for 6. So we do always do those considerations because we've got to try and accommodate a bike store as well. Sometimes there's an existing building there that can be readapted. But in this case, with the number of occupiers, that is 6 occupiers, and with it the ability to go back between C3 and C4 in this application, we're satisfied with the outdoor space.
Thank you for that answer. final questions, or are you going to go for comment?
No,
Question?
It was a question. I'm just clarifying, is this property within an RPZ?
That was the advice of Councillor Brown. I was just checking if it's recorded in the report, Chair.
If it's helpful, I think it is.
I was just trying to see if it was actually recorded in the comments from the Highways team, but it's not mentioned by the Highways team.
I raise it partly because the question has come up in, I'm a deputy, so I only come in and out of this, but I think there was going to be that when it was in an RPZ, it was actually going to be mentioned in the report because it has implications for the comments I'll make.
Are you just clarifying that it is an RPZ? Okay, yes, I think we've clarified that. Good
Yeah,
question.
it's part
though.
of the GD parking zone.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Brown. Okay, are there any other questions? Okay, over to the committee for comments or proposals. Councillor Canley.
I'll kick the ball off. So I'll first of all follow up the reason I was looking to clarify.
Can you move your mic just in front?
I thought I had it in a good position, but I obviously didn't. The reason I asked about the RPZ and why I think it's helpful to put it in is that there will be a limit of 2 vehicles on the property, irrespective of whether it's an HMO or a family property in terms of getting permits within a permitted zone. So there isn't a difference there. These are very difficult because it is clear there were some challenges to the purpose of local democracy and the power of this committee, and it is clear that the local residents do not want this development. But it is difficult to see how this development is difficult materially from all the other HMOs that are passed within the city, and where I have not yet heard where, in ways that I think will be supportable in planning law, that we have found a reason to be rejecting this application. I'm conscious that the report takes care to spell out that various reasons why attempts to appeal on certain grounds have been made by this committee, and the planning inspector has rejected them, and that incurs costs for the council. So I would, unless my colleagues can find some reasons in planning law, I can find no reasons why we can reject this.
Can I take that as a proposal?
I'm always willing to listen to colleagues. So if they come up with any planning committees, any planning laws, I might not propose.
Okay, all right, that's not a proposal then. Thank you for your comment. Anyone else got a comment or a proposal? Councillor Vernon Jackson.
So I've tried to listen very carefully to what people have said, and I'm very conscious that we've got deputies both from residents and from local councillor who's not happy with this. And I've tried to go through and ask questions through this process to look at reasons why this committee might have some flexibility to be able to say no. I'm also very conscious that from the autumn, councillors are removed from this process, and there will be a total and absolute lack of democracy in making these decisions, which is appalling. But that's what the government has decided, and it'll be the people sitting behind us who will make all of those decisions, or behind me rather, who will be making all of these decisions and aren't in no way democratically accountable, which is a risk to them. It also means that I think local residents will be extremely angry. But that's just where the government is, and it's another thing where the government has got it completely wrong. So going through, we've asked about the fire risk, because we have to be conscious that any decision we make here can be appealed by the developer, and we because we've been through this time and time again, we know what the government planning inspectors are, what their decisions are. So, in terms of fire risk, the advice is that it is no worse fire risk than any other property in that street. We've tried to use, because Councillor Simpson is here, and we tried to use the over-intensification with more bathrooms to look at pressure on the sewers. And that came, we said no to a planning application because there was evidence of breakdown in the sewers. When that went to appeal, the government planning inspector said it was fine. We tried to look at room sizes, and all the room sizes are in here are adequate. There's one thing in the report. Sorry, I was going to ask, and I think this will be. It says all in the deputation. It said all the en suites are unvented. I don't think you're allowed to have unvented bathrooms anymore, are you, David?
Again, I think that's a matter for building regs, Chair.
Okay, so it's not a so I don't think you are, but okay, it's not something we're allowed to look at. So I am at a loss to find a reason for us to say no that has any hope of being sustained. And I think we are being, because we've been through, we've looked at each of the reasons that people have brought up to say no. And I think it is not what councillors should do just to try to curry favour with residents, knowing that at appeal that application will be approved. So we know the building work can happen anyway, irrespective of what anybody says. It just happens. It's just about whether there are 6 unrelated adults living in a house, one more than the next door house, but they are a family, and whether that we could defend that at an appeal. I think we would be giving residents a false hope and being dishonest if we said that there is anything that's been given to us today that can give us any chance of being able to say no and sustaining that at appeal. This is the building work can happen anyway. It's just whether it can be an HMO or not, and nothing that we have been given, the planning officers say is a reason that we could turn it down and that would happen. So I don't like HMOs. I wish we couldn't have them, but I can't see anything that says that we can turn this down sustainably. So I'm going to move the officer recommendation. If I'm happy to withdraw it, if people here in the committee have got reasons that they can come up with and tell me that this can be turned down, and if somebody can persuade me that, I'll withdraw that proposal. But I can't see anything. Other people may be better at this than me, and they might be able to spot it. But on that basis, very reluctantly, because I know people don't want it, but I think I don't think there is a reason in law to say no.
Thank you for that long, but I think it's worthwhile because I think people need to know that the committee don't make decisions flippantly or, without interrogating information, and we have a responsibility that to do the role of the planning committee, professionally. Thank you for that. So I've got that one proposal from Councillor Vernon Jackson. Is there either anyone who's prepared to second that, or if there is a counter proposal?
And Chair, I'd be really interested from anybody else on the committee if you can think of another reason, reason that I haven't thought of to say no, because I might be persuadable.
Exactly. So that, I would just say the same thing. Is there anyone either happy to second that or to come up with a counter proposal based on material planning reasons? Tumbleweed. Councillor Valley.
For the same reasons, I'll second it. I can't think of anything.
Chair. Sorry to interrupt. Now we've got a proposal and a seconder. Councillor Brown did ask if we put a further condition on to say about single occupancy. Can we now just include that as well, please?
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to come to that. I was just waiting to see, but thank you for reminding me because I sometimes do forget these things. I think it's a really reasonable additional condition if this is granted planning permission. So thank you. Last chance, anyone for counter proposal? Okay, so we've got one proposal in front of us, reluctantly proposed by Councillor Vernon Jackson and seconded by Councillor Vallely to move officer's recommendation for conditional permission with the additional condition, is that okay, to state that there should be single occupancy?
Just because we need to give a reason, what's our, for each condition that we impose, what's our planning reason for restricting the numbers, Chair? It needs to be related to some aspect of harm if there were double occupancy in those rooms.
All right. Councillor, you're going to come up with the...
In lots of these applications, it says they ask for planning permission for six people. I wouldn't say single occupancy. I'd say 6 people because that is more flexible. I just think you can say that it's a small mid-terrace house and that over 6 people would be over density of occupation.
Councillor Standen.
Thank you, Chair. Just one thing I've just very quickly picked up on, and it is a question, so I'm sorry I've missed it. I just picked up on it. It says in here that there's a shortfall of 0.5 parking spaces against the guidance of our own parking standards. How much weight would that carry in an appeal, if any? Because there's no point in putting something across if it's just going to get thrown away. I understand that, but obviously I would like to, if it's not matching our parking standards, then
Yes, yeah. So it may be before you were on the committee, Councillor, there was a number of applications refused on parking grounds for that very reason, that half space shortfall. So those were taken to appeal, and we have to say that the inspectors were unsympathetic, so we did lose those arguments on the basis of being able to evidence the material harm that flows from that lack of parking, that half space. So we have explored that extensively. I think there's 5 to 6 decisions that we've had, and we're getting a very consistent response from the planning inspectors that they don't see that as an overriding harm to refuse the application.
Okay, thank you. Is that also in case if the house or if the property falls within a restricted parking zone?
Yes, yeah, I mean, that's been, the decisions were in RPZs, outside of RPZs, one decision where the parking standards were both the same. So, yes, yeah, we've explored both those sort of issues, you know, inside and outside of the RPZs as well.
Okay, incredibly frustrating, but thank you.
Well rehearsed over the years. I mean, I would say where something falls within an RPZ, it is actually more beneficial than when it's not in an RPZ because of the nature of the allocation of permits. It's got its own cap, but it's still 2 and not 1.5. But yes, it's a good question. Okay, any other comments or proposals? So we have one in front of us. Were you happy, David, with the comment made about the wording around the conditional permission, the additional thing about limiting it to 6?
Yes, I was just capturing that. I mean, if you wanted to refer to the outside space as well.
Yes, I was about to say that, and the outside space. Cool, that's good. So, given that proposal in front of us, all those in favour, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4. All those against, 0. And all those abstaining, 3. Okay, I'm assuming that Jane is capturing this in the absence of a legal person. Okay, that brings us to the end of the first agenda item. Thank you very much to everyone doing deputations. So planning permission is granted. Okay, we'll move swiftly on to agenda item 5, which is 92 Gladys Avenue. And over to Simon, I think, who I believe is doing the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So we have an application at 92 Gladys Avenue for the change of use from a dwelling house, Class C3, to a house in multiple occupation, Class C4. The application is in Hilsea Ward, and the item has come to Planning Committee because of the numbers of objections and a call in from Councillor Simpson. Councillor Simpson is here to make a deputation, and Mr Hill, the agent, and we have some SMAT, supplementary matters, as well at the end. So Gladys Avenue runs there north to south. Just get the pointer for you. North to south, and we have Oriel and Shadwell roads running off to the east on either side across 400 metres to London Road. And to the south to North End Local Centre and the buses, etc. It's a semi-detached property. It is semi-detached. It's a slightly unusual arrangement here, but from this side it is attached to to the house to the immediate south. Number 90. So access is down the side here, and the front door, inverted commas, is on the side elevation, as happens with some properties. You can see behind the arrow there is what looks like an original side dormer in the roof to provide the fourth bedroom up in the roof.
Simon, could I just check? The building where the front door is forward, just to the right, that's not the property?
Correct, that's next door. So
Okay.
the application site is really the bay window and then down the side here.
So quite small and thin, like myself.
You'll see the floor plans in a moment, Councillor. Okay, on to the first matter of mixed and balanced communities. We've checked again carefully, and that'll come up in the supplementary matters, the exact numbers of licences and properties in the area. There are 5 licences within the HMO, within the 50-metre radius, marked in the 5 purple dots. If approved, changing this from a C3 dwelling house to a C4, that would be 6, which 6 out of 65 is 9.23. So it just falls below still the 10% threshold. So from that mathematical assessment, it would still result in a mixed and balanced community in accordance with your guidance and policy. There are, Councillor. It's not so slim. I would say it's a decent sized property in terms of width. You saw the big bay window on the front, and there's the door down to the side. So this side distance is between 1.5 and 1 metres from recollection. So existing, you go into a kitchen, the stairs are there, living room at the front, dining room, dining, etc. at the back, and upstairs to 3 bedrooms and the loft room I described earlier with the side-facing dormer. So these living rooms, the 2 downstairs and the middle one upstairs, look across that fairly short gap here. So they have limited light and outlook. So you may have noticed in the report there was an earlier application this year for conversion to 9-bedroom HMO. That was refused under delegated powers by the officers because of concern about the light and outlook to the rooms being converted facing across that narrow, fairly dark alleyway. It was covered in scaffolding at the time, and the case officer took account of that, made it worse, but in her and our judgment it still was difficult to support. So that was refused. So clearly the application has come back in, and there's the elevations as existing. There's the side dormer. Here are the side windows facing across the flank wall of the adjoining house you've just seen. So with some repurposing inside, you would still use the side door there. There's a shared communal space to the front, which meets your guidelines. Because all the bedrooms are 10 square metres or some way beyond, The shared communal space needs to be 22.5, and that is 26.3, with a decent outlook. And then moving back, there's a bedroom at the rear with its ensuite. And then the 3 rooms, the subject to the previous refusal, are shown as spare living rooms, the surplus to requirements essentially for the purpose of this application for 6 people and 6 bedrooms. So they're the 2 rooms in the centre downstairs and this room on the first floor. So they are spare as set out in the officer report. Then moving on to the other rooms, ensuite bedrooms 2, 3 and 4. Bedroom 3 was a bedroom before, or is a bedroom, hence no objection to that being returned to a bedroom this time. And 5 and 6, this would be an extended roof by virtue of a permitted development side dormer, and also to the rear I should have mentioned permitted development. No, it's just the roof dormer. Apologies. That's right. Yeah. So that is the enlarged dormer on the side there, with a window to the front and to the rear, lighting those 2 bedrooms. So here is the scaffolding that was seen on site earlier this year, which did make it darker down there, but as I said, the case officer took account of that as best she and we could. Some work's clearly going on to the property already. So here's the front room. That would be the communal room with the bay window to the front, to the street. Bedroom rear, that bedroom 1, sorry, that's the rear bedroom looking down the back garden. There it is, looking from the outside. There's the side access. So that is the front, inverted commas, door into the side of the house. So you can see the relationship to the neighbour and hence the previous concern. And bedroom 3. So it complies with your mixed and balanced communities policy, and it complies with your standards for rooms and sizes, and indeed their layout, configuration and light in the officer's opinion. We have had 11 objections, and we'll hear from Councillor Simpson in a moment. With respect to the supplementary matters, the SMAT report, following the agenda publication, we've received one further comment from one of the previous objectors. Because we've revisited during the course of the application, looking at the HMO numbers and the property numbers in the 50-metre radius, the numbers have changed. That we've settled on what's in front of you in the report and republished them. The objector has seen those numbers and still disagrees. So number 1, he thinks the updated HMO data count that we provided does not provide an accurate calculation in relation to the number of properties stroke section 257 HMO licenses. And number 2, he feels that all flat conversions should be included in the HMO data count. So with respect to section 257, so just to be clear for committee, there are some flats, not HMOs, but flats, conversions of a building, typically a Victorian or Edwardian building, house, converted into 2 flats. Depending on when the application was made for that conversion and the fire safety regulations, if it wasn't covered by the building regulations, the fire safety matter still has to be addressed, and that's addressed by an HMO licence. So the property will have a licence on it, although it doesn't necessarily contain an HMO. And that's what we've had to recount and check for carefully. And we are confident that the figures provided for you are now accurate. Thank you nevertheless to Mr Thorpe, who did provide these further comments and asked us to look at a number of addresses, which we have done. His second comment, that all flat conversions should be included in the HMO data count, that's incorrect. That is not the HMO guidance at all. There are flats in the 50-metre radius, as they are probably in most 50-metre radiuses you see, but if they're C3 flats, they're not HMOs and they're not counted. There are residential addresses that count towards that total, but they're not HMOs. And then, well, Councillor Simpson, we've got you next. There we are. I think I've given you the main points for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you for the report and the SMAT update. We have several...
Chairman, I do apologise. There was the Councillor Hunt email.
Yes, I'm going to come to that. So I was going to say we've got 3 deputations. We've got Simon Hill, who have 6 minutes. Oh, he's saying that there seems to be another document that hasn't been circulated. So the map. Sorry. Is there anyone else who hasn't got the map? Sorry.
Because it was a lot of printing, I didn't do
There you go.
multiples.
Thank you. So we've got on your deputations list, Simon, 6 minutes, Councillor Simpson, but also had an email yesterday from Councillor Adair, who can't make it because they're on leave. And I'm hoping that the committee will agree that I can just read that out in the same way that my deputations were read out last time. I think I'd be a bit hypocritical if I didn't agree to that when I couldn't be here. So so there's 3 deputations. So we'll start with Simon, who has 6 minutes. Six minutes? Simon?
Chair, can I just check? I've got 6 maps. Is that? And
It's the whole road.
But are we all meant to have 6?
Yes, you're all meant to have 6, yes.
Oh, I think that's going to be complicated.
I did
then.
tell Jane Danino that it was a pack. Unless people start handing them down, which is probably not very clever.
Could we have a break just to see if everybody can have the right things in front of them before? Because you're going to refer to this, aren't you, Russell?
I am.
Councillor Simpson.
Okay, let's just have a quick adjournment to make sure that everyone's... Are they numbered? Are the pages numbered? Oh,
They're
dear.
unnumbered
Okay,
and
this is gonna
quite
be...
complicated.
We'll have a quick... Yes, please. Okay. Okay, we're back on after that little adjournment where we were getting consecutive pages of a map joined up in the right order. So we will go back to the deputations in the order that I have presented in front of me. So Simon is going to go first. You have 6 minutes. Is that Simon? Yes.
Give me 2 seconds. Sorry. Just set myself a timer. First of all, given the maps and the obvious comment about parking that I'm sure is coming in a second, I just wanted to say that whilst I appreciate the concern regarding parking pressures on the road, particularly given the presence of bus stops and other restrictions, it's been specifically addressed by the council's own highway and transport officers, who are the technical experts in the area, and they have raised no objections, having considered the site's precise location, existing parking restrictions, accessibility, and likely transport impacts of the proposal, and they've raised no objections for the application being recommended for approval. Similarly, planning decisions must be based on evidence rather than assumptions. The evidence of bus stops or parking restrictions does not in itself demonstrate that this proposal would cause severe highway impacts that are likely to be detrimental on local properties. And if the council specialist transport officers have concluded that the development would result in unacceptable parking stress or highway safety issues, they would have said so, which they didn't. Secondly, on parking, the council's planning officer specifically refused this property for an application previously. That same officer, given our amended plans, has recommended these plans for approval. So somebody who has the power to do so, didn't need to bring it to committee, and previously refused an application, is personally satisfied that this application that you have in front of you complies in all manner with all of the legislation that it needs to in order for it to gain planning permission, which I think holds very significant weight. Furthermore, if the council's planning committee were to refuse planning permission for this property, we would have no choice, because it is a fully compliant scheme, to appeal, and obviously there are the potential costs associated with that. Doing so, the council's planning record for the committee, sorry to mention it, I think is about 87% overturned for ones that go to appeal. So I think we've got a pretty strong chance of getting planning permission if we did, very unfortunately, have to go to appeal, and I really genuinely hope that we don't have to. So, thank you for allowing me to speak on this matter. First of all, I want to go through the plans. Is it possible to get them on the screen, please? It's super important to stress in this particular case that every single piece of work that's done to this property does not require planning permission. The only thing that requires planning permission is the occupation of the property where 3 or more unrelated individuals. All of the works do not require planning permission. In fact, just to be super clear on this property, the average property that we convert, having done about 160 of them in the last 5 years, the average property we convert is somewhere between 90 and 100 square metres. This property, when it started, according to the EPC, was 215 square metres. It's a massive house. It's more than double the size of the average house that we convert into HMOs. In terms of all of the bedrooms, all of them are fully compliant. For example, the front bedroom on the middle floor, bedroom 4, you'll see this over 11 square metres, plus it's actually got an extra bit of space, which is 3 square metres, so it's actually a huge 14 square metre bedroom. To cover off the point, we do genuinely try and take on board comments from officers and planning committee, and in this particular property that's super important. Bedroom 3 has historically always been a bedroom. This property was in a state of disrepair when we bought the property. But bedroom 3 was and has for a very long time, I think since the property was built, been a bedroom. It has always had the outlook it currently has, and therefore there is absolutely no lawful reason why that bedroom cannot remain to be a bedroom according to planning policy, and that's why when that bedroom is being used, refused, the officer has recommended it for approval because there is no grounds that it can be refused on that basis. Similarly, with the loft conversion, rather than putting the windows on the side of the dormer, which would be a sensible place to do so because it's a huge space, we put them on the front and back of the dormer to make sure that the outlook that it was given was a much better outlook than it otherwise might have been. So based on the comments from the officer, so you'll see bedroom 5 and bedroom 6, the windows are to the front and to the rear rather than to the side. There wasn't an extension needed on this property, it already had an extension, so the only works structurally are the steel works and the loft conversion. Furthermore, in terms of the number of HMOs, it is a hard and fast rule, that's 10%. Ultimately, it was 7.23, including the section 257 HMOs, which are flats but still get counted and we have to deal with the same rules. It's still less than 10%. The council have done a second check to make sure it's fully compliant. It is fully compliant and it is definitely less than 10% HMOs, including this application, it's 9.23. That means that this falls below the council's adopted 10% threshold, which means it's fully compliant with PCS 20. The proposal does not create an HMO sandwich, nor does it create a row of continuous HMOs of more than 2 in a row. The concerns are understandable. I think as a city we need to understand we are the most densely populated city in the country outside of London. We have one of the lowest average ages. Our average age is 34. The average age of buying a house in the UK is 38. So statistically, the average person wandering the streets in Portsmouth is too young to own a house, and therefore there's going to be a significantly higher percentage of people renting in this city compared to others. We're over 50% rentals. In Bromley and Kent is 13%. We have a massive rental population. They all need properties, and therefore I genuinely think that this property in its current form offers an incredible solution for the problems we have. There are currently 3 times as many properties on the market for sale as there has been previously because of Section 24 tax changes, because of the Renters' Rights Act. Huge numbers of landlords are selling in their droves, loads and loads of them. All that means is accidental and hobby landlords who previously owned properties are selling. They're either selling to owner-occupiers or they're selling to deliberate or institutional investors. That means rents are going up because that's what those investors care about, significantly more than accidental or hobby landlords who inherited property or similar. That means rents will go up, which means that HMOs will become a significantly more needed solution to our housing requirements. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So, the next deputation on my list is Councillor Russell Simpson. You have up to 6 minutes and maybe...
It's a very calm deputation, Chair. So, thank you, Chair and Committee. Today feels like deja vu. Not only is it another HMO in Gladys Avenue, but another new HMO application in this part of Portsmouth. It's had definitely the lion's share over the last 4 years. Residents really have had enough of seeing their roads change from a traditional family road with family homes to 6 to 8 adults in one household. The impact has been great, not only on the value of their home, which they have worked their whole life to pay off, but the rise in antisocial behaviour that comes with it. Residents do say to me, if we were brave enough as a council to consider the lower percentage, say 5%, per 50 metre radius, this application wouldn't be here today. Before I give my main reason, I am interested in how the kitchen extraction will leave the house, as the kitchen is not on an outside wall. And it also makes me question if they've got a boiler, where's that also going to go? That will keep up the whole house, and that also has to be on an outside wall. And as you can see, a lot of bathrooms are taking up a lot of corners and spaces of where they would extract. But I think the kitchen, that is definitely something, if I was planning committee, I would raise, because you're having 6 adults cook there, and that's a lot. That's a lot going out. Where's it going? The extraction is not going to be enough just as a filter for 6 people. However, I do believe this so going back to my main point, however, I do believe this application should be refused based on one thing that wasn't refused last time, and that is parking. Again, I present the map of Gladys Avenue, which is 6 pages, which road is shared with Nelson Ward, and you can clearly see 50+% of the parking is gone. It's gone to bus stops, it's gone to double yellow lines for cars to pass, it's gone because of school lanes, it's gone because of entrance to roads and properties. It's also one of the few roads in the area that doesn't have 1 space per household, which is normally the argument in surrounding roads of, well, you know, it's got 1.5, so adding a few extra adults would make a difference. That's not the case here. We measure it on that. We can't measure these properties in this road on that. I digress. So how this isn't a genuine concern, a material change, is mind-boggling. In fact, an HMO was refused permission in Gladys Avenue in August last year, exactly on parking. It wasn't appealed to the Planning Inspectorate. I've been online and checked, and the reason for the refusal was the following, and I'm going to read out the whole of the refusal so it could be, hopefully, reference. The proposal, by reason of increased parking demand associated with the change of use, would fail to make provision for car parking in accordance with the requirements of the Council's adopted parking standards supplementary planning document 2014. Accordingly, the development would fail to provide an adequate level of parking to meet the transport needs of the occupiers, which would be likely to increase demand for already limited on-street parking facilities, causing local residents to have to spend time driving around, searching for a space, to the detriment of the residential amenity of the area. The extra time driving around already congested streets would also increase the risk of accidents and so have an unacceptable impact on the highway safety. As such, the proposal would be contrary to policies PCS 17 and PCS 23 of the Portsmouth Plan, contrary to the aims and objectives of the Adopted Parking Standards SPD 2014, and contrary paragraph 116 of the NPPF. You know, it's already kind of said why the real reason is, but let's also add that people do tend to take risks. There's no guarantee, but if they can't park and they've been around for 30 minutes, they will park in bus stops. They will park in WO lines, which makes it harder for emergency vehicles to get around. And when you've got a road that doesn't have one parking space essentially outside their house, that's most likely going to happen. And we've already witnessed that, I'm pretty sure, in all the wards in Portsmouth. So because of this, I believe 92 Gladys Avenue should be refused on material grounds of parking standards.
Thank you very much for your deputation. Well within your time, thank you. I'm just going to find the deputation that I've got to read out. 1 second. Okay, so this is a deputation from Councillor Richard Adair. Please read this out to committee. For every good reason, the change of use from dwelling house to a 9-bed HMO was refused because of inadequate natural light in 3 of the bedrooms and a very poor outlook leading to a substandard level of accommodation. On this occasion, I respectfully request that the committee members look very closely at the proposed internal arrangements. Having knocked on lots of doors and spoken to many residents, I can inform the committee that another change of use from a dwelling house to an HMO in this area is not wanted. The area is already oversubscribed for parking, and more people are being crammed into this densely residential area. Local people tell me that the increasing number of HMOs in the area undermines community cohesion and has an adverse impact on local services such as GPs and sewage. That's the end of the deputation from Councillor Adair. So that brings us to the end of the deputations. So I now go over to the committee for questions. I'm going to give someone else a chance to go first because they put their hand up quickly. Councillor Cordy.
Thank you, Chair. Could we have a look at the map again with the radius, the 50-metre radius, please? Is it possible that we could zoom in on this slightly? Is that possible? Yeah, thank you. That's great. My first question is in regards to the 4th house along Shadwell Road. It's the 4th blue dot on the southern side of Shadwell Road. It seems that the radius just sort of scratches the boundary there, and that's obviously been included into the count. Now,
yes. Sometimes it literally can just scratch the boundary. It is to boundaries, it's not the building, it's the boundary of a property. So if it scratches it, touches it like that, then we will include it. If it's a fraction further out, then we won't.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm just wondering if we could look at, think of it as a clock, if we could look at 6 o'clock and zoom in on to 6 o'clock, please. I just wanted to see if it looks like exactly the same thing's occurring there, that it's scratching the boundary there, which you just said that you would put in, which is number 80 Gladys Avenue, which according to the HMO register is a HMO. Now, I wonder why that's not been added. Could you explain that to me, please?
Yeah, Councillor. It's thickness of lines. It's down to that.
Well, you literally just said if it touches it. We've zoomed in there, and I can see that's exactly the same as 125 Shadwell.
I don't think it includes number 82. I'll show you the other one. It's thickness of lines. We think it touches that one.
So, okay, so let's go back to where the measurement started from. I mentioned it in the last application, and you told me that there's a legal requirement to start the measurement from, let me just get this exactly right, the centre front elevation of the property. Now, we can't actually see that because we've got this double orange triangle completely blocking the property. Why have we got a double orange triangle blocking the whole of the property? Where in the past, I've never seen this before. In the past, we usually have a blue dot with perhaps an arrow, like in the previous application. So we're trying to make a judgment here on whether or not that is centralised within that radius. It doesn't look centralised to me. We can't make a judgment on that because it's completely blocked off. Why have you put the double orange triangle? That's my question. It's ridiculous.
The officer clearly wanted us to very clearly identify the application premises. I know it's obviously in the centre of the circle. It obviously wasn't done with any intention to block viewing of where the actual line is, but all the officers know where to take the line from. The centre of the 50-metre radius is from the, as we said,
So why is there
centre.
no consistency with the markers that are used then? Why have we got on the previous application a blue dot with an arrow just pointing to the house, and on this one we've got this humongous double orange triangle? It makes no sense to me.
The IT system, I think, has a certain amount of officer input. It's not entirely automated, so that's why a different officer's perhaps chosen a slightly different symbol. It would be nicer if they were all consistent. No.
I think they should be consistent. And I'm going to come back to number 80 Gladys Avenue as well. That's touching the line. You've said that if it touches the line or grazes the line, it's included. I think 80 should be included.
Matthew, which one is 80?
If you think of the radius as 6 o'clock, so we've got
1833.
It's difficult to see on it. We've got the sort of the burgundy triangle across the exactly there. Yes. So
Thank you.
Simon, could we zoom in on that again, please?
Well, the pointer disappears when I zoom, but I'll do it for you.
Yeah, we know where 80 is now. Thank you. So that's touching the line there. Could we go back to 125 Shadwell, please, and zoom in? Which has been included. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That's the end of my question.
I think there was a genuine overlap. I think very, very fine for the Shadwell one, and it doesn't quite touch as much for the.
Okay, so going back to my previous question about where the measurement was taking place in the centre, we can't see that. It's completely blocked by two orange triangles, which I've never seen before. I've been on this for 2 years now. I've never seen a big double triangle like that taking up the majority of the property. We can't see the centre of that. The radius here does not look like it's centralised to me. I'm sorry. We need to be able to see these things clearly to make decisions, important decisions.
So I think what you're saying is if the centre, I just want to clarify, if the centre of the double triangle is the centre of the circle, then actually that doesn't look like it's in the right place on the house, the front of the centre of the house. If the circle's right, then the triangle is misleading it because it doesn't then look like that's in an accurate centre position. Yeah.
I would suggest that the triangles are just a marker and that it's been measured from the centre, let me get this right, the centre of the front elevation of the property. But we can't see that here.
Yeah,
We've got to make the judgment.
Okay.
And also, 125 Shadwell's been included with the greys. 80, which is a registered HMO on the Portsmouth Register, HMO register, hasn't been included. If it had been included, this would be over 10%.
Yeah. Any other questions? Let's stick to questions while we've got it. Councillor Vernon-Jackson. Thank you.
Well, that's a very important point that we've had there. But can I ask, is there anything in the local plan the new local plan that we have adopted that would say that this is outside what the new local plan would approve? So my understanding is we're meant to take note of what is in the new local plan, but if that was in operation, would the recommendation be the same or would it be different?
According to the report, the relevant policies in the new local plan are design, HMOs, which I believe is the +1s, +2s, +3s to an established one, space standards, movement and transport,
so,
access and parking, but I don't know the details of
but
those.
I'm sure our colleagues behind me do.
Yes, exactly. So what
So
you
my
want
question,
the content of the relevance of the policies?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the principal change in the emerging local plan is with respect, from the adopted, is with respect to the considerations when an area is already above 10%. This committee has discussed in recent times, but otherwise, with respect to this application, Councillor, no, there's no significant change in policy or guidance.
Councillor Vernon-Jackson, carry on.
completely different kettle of onions. The difference between the previous application and this application, are there any physical differences in the plans between the two? For room layouts, etc.
Thank you, Councillor. I thought I'd... here we are, yeah. I did check beforehand. Very minor change in, well, a change in the position of the stairs because the property is being internally refurbished. So the bedrooms and living rooms in the middle and the back of the house were pretty much the same.
Can you get the plans up again, please?
Sorry, yeah.
Thank you.
To answer your question succinctly, Councillor, the communal room on the ground floor at the front has changed a bit at its rear, where the doors and the kitchen element is shown. That's changed slightly, but otherwise the property, as refused, is pretty much the same as currently proposed.
And if because we have to make decisions that link to the property, not to any individual landlord or whatever, or owner, if in future there was a landowner who used what looks exactly like bedrooms with space for an en-suites on there and attempted to have 9 bedrooms operational, would that then fail, apart from the issue of light, but would that fail any other planning issue? So space in the garden, etc., etc., etc. Space in the communal room, the kitchen, dining room.
Well, that would be the same proposal that was refused earlier this year, and it was failed on the technical grounds of special protection areas mitigation. But the one matter was the outlook and light to those 3 rooms that are no longer shown as bedrooms. But to also extend perhaps your line of questioning, Councillor, that would require planning permission to repurpose those 3 rooms back into or into bedrooms. That would require planning permission as a material change from a C4.
Councillor Vernon-Jackson, carry on.
Now, people have often told me that I'm a nasty and cynical person. The difference of having those 3 empty rooms repurposed and let is around 20,000 quid a year into a landlord's pocket. If we said yes to this today, how do we keep an eye on and make sure that maybe not the current owner, but a future one, decided that 20,000 quid a year into their back pockets was worth doing this without coming back for planning permission?
Thank you, Councillor. If you were minded to grant planning permission for what's in front of you and you had that concern, you could conceivably attach a condition restricting the occupancy of the premises. If there's a planning reason attached to that, presumably that would be the same concern as the delegated refusal about light and outlook.
I have a question which is related, which I raised previously, which is related to what Councillor Van Jackson is saying, which is it seems really odd that there will be 3 completely empty rooms. I understand that the previous planning application was refused on amenity and light in particular. So my question, which I want to repeat, is would a developer in the future be able to add windows to that side elevation that would tackle the reason for refusal around light and therefore potentially have another planning application in front to increase this occupancy by 3, and I know probably what the answer is going to be is we have to deal with what we've got in front of us, and that would be the case in the future. But I think it's really positive that the planning committee investigates the, what the decision that we're making. So windows, could they be added and then another application happen?
The matters of building regulations and or planning consent depending on what is proposed, but on the assumption that perhaps you wouldn't need planning permission to either enlarge or add some windows. There'll be a judgment around whether that requires planning permission, but I'm not sure how much that could change the light and outlook to those rooms. I can't determine that, but I'm not sure it would change it sufficiently to overcome that concern.
Can I just carry on my window thing and then I'll go back to, sorry, using my privilege here. So there was a comment which I don't think I understood fully about the windows in bedrooms 5 and 6. Was it that the outlook is to the front of the house and the back of the house? Well, the majority of that flank is a loo. So I'm trying to imagine if I was in bedroom 6 or bedroom 5 and there's no window to the side, for I understand the reasons. So my window is my toilet and presumably quite a small window in bedroom 6 to the front and bedroom 5. I mean, it may be the case that, we look at other similarly sized rooms and decide that the window is adequate. But for me, I think it's a little bit misleading to say that the windows are facing the front and the back when actually the majority of that is. I'm not saying there's not a loo in the there's not a window in the loo, but you wouldn't be wanting that to be your main source of light. So have I understood that correctly?
Thank you, Chair. Well, yes. So each of these 2 rooms in this permitted development dormer would have a room facing to the front, which is west, room 6, and east to room 5. So they get sun and daylight at different times of the day in terms of direct sunlight, but daylight all day. And being high up, if I take you to the next one, being high up above the hip and so on, I think there would be adequate outlook and adequate light to both of them.
No, I was aware that there might be an extra window in the loo. I'm not too sure whether there is, but most people wouldn't have their toilet door open in order to get some light, I'm imagining, or their bathroom door open. But so there's only quite a tiny window there. That was but it might well be that meets standards.
Well, the shower room in each just seems to be a separate room without any lights, which is not a problem in a shower room. The bedrooms both have a decent-sized window at roof height.
Thank you. Right, sorry, who was next? Councillor Candlish? Is that okay? Yes.
All my questions keep being taken by the people who get the buzzer first and chair's privilege, so I'm happy to pass on.
I was going to ask the same question.
Can we just go back to Councillor Coddy's point about number 80, and if it is a HMO, it's on the HMO register. Are we therefore saying that we should include this in the data, and which would then take it over the 10% limit?
Sorry, Councillor, I missed the start of your question.
So if we're saying that number 80, which is on the HMO register, should be included in the figures, that would take it over 10%. So do we, as a committee, have the power to say we should be including that in the figures?
Thank you, Councillor. So that's really an extension of Councillor Cordy's point, I think, which is absolutely understood and fine. As I say, zooming in on it, we can do that again if you'd like. I feel that the Shadwell Road property is just touched. It's very fractional difference, whereas 80 is just outside. There's a slight difference. And then Councillor Cordy's point was, well, how can we be sure that it's properly recorded in the centre point of the radius? We can't see that centre point. A colleague back in the office has just rechecked it and has come to the same conclusion. So you have to take officer's word for it. I can't show you now in this presentation, but it's properly recorded from the centre point of the application site. And then, as I've said, the property to the east, which isn't in HMO, is just included, just overlapping, and number 80 is just outside. Yeah, whether or not that's an HMO, no importance to the officers. If it's outside, it's outside. Yeah, your points are, how can we be confident about that? I have to leave that with you.
Councillor Vernon Jackson.
Thank you. Just a quick thing on those. In the paperwork I've got, reading the little small print on the right to tell me what different colours mean in papers that are all grey, is very, very small. Is there any chance in future we can have things that are where the type size is readable?
Yes, as noted, we'll take that away, Chair.
All three of you at the same time. Councillor Stan.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to go back to a point that Councillor Simpson made in his deputation with regards to the kitchen. It is all up against an internal wall, and the only other part of the kitchen where I can only assume there might be fridges or cupboards and a worktop is actually up against the wall that is butted up against the adjacent house. Where is any sort of kitchen fumes? Where is the extractor fan going to go out? How are they going to be able to take the cooking fumes out of the room? There is no connection to an outside wall there for an extractor fan to be fitted.
Thank you, Councillor. That is not a planning matter. That will be down to licensing, I think, and/or building regulations, getting to down to those sort of details of ventilation, etc., etc.
Thank you.
Councillor Cordy.
Thank you, Chair. I'd also like to go back to Councillor Simpson's deputation and ask the officers about parking. Is it true that we've lost 50% of parking down Gladys Avenue due to bus stops, corners of roads, etc.? And what's the parking standard around one space per household? Because Councillor Simpson said that it doesn't actually meet that at the moment anyway.
The parking standards are set out in the report. I think Councillor Simpson was referring to an expectation or the ability, if the property is wide enough, you might be able to park a car in front. Right. Okay. So you were talking about the SPD standard. Okay.
So I believe that if you counted the amount of houses and measured the amount of actual parking down the road, that it would come in at less than one parking bay per house. Is that correct?
I've no idea. I don't know how wide the houses are. I can answer the question about your SPD on parking standards, which does have flexibility depending on where you are with relation to public transport and local centres. This is quite close to the London Road, 400 metres away or so, with the local shops and North End Centre and public buses, etc. The SPD standard for a dwelling house with 4 or more bedrooms is 2 spaces. That's the same for an HMO with 4 more bedrooms. So if you want to just look at the pure standard, there's no change in the expectation between what it is now as a dwelling house and an HMO. Excuse me. I don't know what's changed, Councillor, over the years on the street in terms of changes to W lines and bus parking or bus stops and so on. I don't know that. We've had 3 applications in the vicinity here in recent years, 85 and 87. Gladys Avenue, both consented by committee or by the planning authority in 2019-2024 for HMOs away from dwelling houses, and 80 Gladys, which was referred to last year, that was refused by the planning committee on parking grounds. That appeal was dismissed. The inspector was not persuaded that a big house that could be occupied by a big family with plenty of parking would be materially different to an HMO. The appeal was allowed, I'm sorry. So planning permission was granted. The inspector didn't find that the parking reason could be upheld by him or her.
I've got a couple of other questions just to close off, just for clarification from Councillor Simpson's deputation, because I know that residents will be interested in this. But just to clarify, when it comes to the planning committee, we cannot make any decisions with regard to the value of someone's home, and that the nature of the people living there being associated with antisocial behaviour. Is that correct? In terms of planning?
Yes, so the value of someone's home which might be affected by a development is not a material factor. The potential impact on antisocial behaviour would be a material consideration. Our evidence in the HMO SPD is all related to whether there's an over-concentration of HMOs, where there's then evidence of some issues following from that, but we don't have the evidence where the 10% where we are below our 10% mixed and balanced communities to demonstrate that that causes an unacceptable impact on antisocial behaviour. And that's also borne out by a number of appeal decisions that we've also seen. So, yes, our evidence is where there's an over-concentration, hence our policy to keep it below 10%.
Thank you for that clarification. Okay, are there any more questions? Oh, Councillor Candlish.
So, whilst my questions about the direct property were all taken by other people, I actually did have one right at the very beginning of the officer's presentation where I heard something which I just want to make sure I understand clearly, because I think a lot of people will be interested. Pardon me. So I understand clearly that when the new government regulations are brought in, that councillors will no longer be able to call in decisions for consideration by the committee. But did you say that the absolute number of objectors, resident objections, was a criteria for bringing that forward, or is that not going to be a material thing, and it will be the same that if they are within smaller than 10 properties at a time, which obviously includes all HMOs, then that will not be that will not be something that will cause it to be brought to a public meeting?
So, yeah, just a couple of things, Chair, to clarify on the forthcoming process. So, the forthcoming process will divide application types into two. So, there are what they call Schedule 1 applications, and they will all automatically be delegated, so things like householder applications. For what they call Schedule 2 applications, we will have what they are referring to legislation as a gateway procedure. So that will be a discussion between your chair and the chief planning officer as to whether an application should be registered. That can only be within those Schedule 2 applications, so that will include major developments, for example. And in our process, which I believe was agreed recently, that will have still a criteria where a major development receives 6 or more objections, that it would go into that discussion process between the chair and the chief planning officer as to whether it's referred to committee. And in those situations, our what's the wording in the guide? Our presumption is it will go in front of members. Likewise, members will be able to request those Schedule 2 applications go to that gateway discussion, that discussion between the chair and the chief planning officer, as to whether it goes to committee. So it's not an absolute call-in as you have at the moment. So, you know, at the moment you do a request, it automatically goes. it's a request to go to that discussion process, and then the process sets out that there are general presumptions that things will go to committee and general presumptions that more minor things won't go to committee. So we'll all have to deal with getting our heads around how the new process will work, but that will still have an effect, i.e. number of objections and call-ins from members for those particular Schedule 2 applications. I hope that makes sense.
So if I can ask a follow-up, so a single HMO could be brought in front of a public committee?
No, unless it, so there's technical reasons why something might fall into Schedule 2. That's where it's retrospective, or the council has an interest or something like that. But no, a minor residential scheme or change of use like this falls into Schedule 1 and is automatically delegated.
So I am now clear, it would not.
Okay, any more questions? Oh, Councillor Vernon Jackson.
Chair, I think Councillor Cordy has brought up a very important issue, and I think we have to look at it very carefully, because if that one property is in, then this can't be an HMO. Automatically it can't, but if it's not, then it might be. I have been, and I think we as members of the committee need to prove to ourselves and not rely on somebody else's judgment that it is, what the position is. Now, I'm wondering whether it is technically possible, if we put this to the end of the agenda, to get things on paper, on big bits of paper, to show us exactly where the centre of that property is and exactly whether it does graze number 80 or not, so that we can be confident that when we come to a decision that we're able to, we could do that. I suppose the other option would be to defer it to the next meeting, but then that risks the applicant going to appeal for non-determination. So I'm just wondering whether technically it is possible to be able to get that, because if not, and if we are going to defer it, we'd want it at that next meeting anyway, on very large bits of paper, because if this is really close and talking about a matter of inches, we need to get it right.
Would that be possible to do that if we suspended this decision, waiting for further information?
Chair?
Hello.
I think Councillor Jackson's point is a good one, because it's basically we need to determine in or out. If we make a big point about defending these rules, they're either there or not. The one bit I might disagree with him on is on the need to print it out on many large bits of paper. I think it is a digital thing that is going to be done, and we will lose accuracy in getting it to bits of paper. This is a VAR decision. Is it onside or offside? Is the shoulder in or is the shoulder back? Honestly, we are in a... I hope there are no residents still left in the building. This is occasionally the mad thing that we are doing, but we work very hard to protect this, as Councillor Vernon Jackson is doing, so let's do it that way.
Chair, I think, I think rather than try and do this on the fly, I would rather that we deferred it for a cycle, if that's acceptable to members, so we can redo that exercise, make sure we're entirely confident, and we can give you transparency in the reports to do that, rather than feel that you're, in some way pressured into making a decision either way when you feel you don't have the full information.
Okay, Councillor Cordy, and then I'll come back to Councillor.
I think it's really important that our residents see that we're doing the right thing, and I think that's the right thing. I would fully back that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm conscious that Simon is waving, who might have more information, but if we are going to, could we have could we have the information in advance of the meeting so that we've got the ability to look at it in detail and resolve any questions before we get back here? And I think that would be really helpful for all of us to look at if that's possible.
I think now it's been raised as a specific issue that we need really real details. I think that would be provided. Arguably, the information was provided, but we've raised a really important issue. And in actual fact, this is the most contentious stuff for us on planning. And we have been, you know, many decisions we have reluctantly made because of those statistics. Therefore, we need to be 100% sure that we're dealing with the right, you know, detail. So I think it's really good. So is that proposal then to...
Chair, I know it is breaking rules, but could we suspend standing orders if the applicant is here and might be able to help us on this, if we could hear from him? We might disagree completely, but actually if he's waving and we choose not to listen, that...
Is it a relevant point to the...
I guess I've got two questions. My first question is understanding that if you decided to defer, it's already been raised that we could then appeal on the basis of not making a decision. Number one, I want to understand, if I make the decision to do that, where does that leave us in terms of whether this count happens and whether we come back, or does it ultimately just go and get a decision made? If I press that button this afternoon, this conversation does this conversation count and we're coming back, or does it mean that a decision is simply based on this? Does that then influence your decisions? And my second point, I guess, would be, on every single application, you can only so far take the information that is presented to you, and you do that on a monthly or 4-weekly basis, 3-weekly in the next one basis, is take the information in front of you. The planning officer, as well as the, as Simon sat over there, have told you that currently, according to the count that you have to use that is available to you, it is number 80 is outside, and Simon said they don't know whether it's an HMO or not when they make that decision. So currently number 80 is not counted in the statistics, and that is the information. Obviously that will form the basis of our decision if we go to non-determination or appeal.
Thank you. Thank you. So hang on. I'm just going back to David to get the answer to the question around that, because we're talking about a 3-week cycle. So I don't know if you file for non-determination, how that will overlap with the next decision making.
So one last point. It's obviously financially as well. If we went for appeal, then obviously there would be potentially a significant cost as a result of doing so.
But the second question, I think, is a really good one as well, is that when we get that piece of information, will we go through the entire, I'm presuming we might have a new committee, and therefore, you know, as in different people on it, and therefore I wouldn't mind clarification on what the procedure would be when we ask for that additional piece of information.
So I'll answer the second question first, because that's the easy one. If between now, if the matter's deferred, and then between now and 18th of August, an appeal is lodged, then we have no further role. So the responsibility then passes to the planning inspectorate, and then we don't have jurisdiction over the decision. We can't have the decision back to us. So any decision that we made would only be in relation to our case at appeal.
I didn't quite hear that last bit. Can you speak into the microphone?
But we would only be bringing it back to ask you what your decision would have been had you made the decision. I hope that makes sense.
Thank you. First bit.
And that so the committee would say what it would have done, and that information will be sent to the planning inspectorate. So it's not the committee's decision on the application that's taken out of your hands by the non-determination appeal, but the inspectorate would see what you would have reached and would take that into account. The point about costs, I don't think you're doing due diligence, so I wouldn't be concerned about a cost claim on this matter.
Thank you. So we have a proposer.
Yeah. Just to be clear, I'm proposing that we defer it for 3 weeks and 3 weeks only. Yeah. To come back to our next meeting so that members of the committee can satisfy themselves very exactly about what the HMO, whether that number 80 Gladys Avenue should be counted in or not. Okay. Is that right, Matthew?
Yeah. And Matthew, I'm assuming you're...
It is, Councillor, yes, and I'd like to second that. if
You'd
I
like to
may.
second
Thank
that. So we have this proposal for deferral proposed by Councillor Van Jackson, seconded by Councillor Cordy. All those in favour?
Chair.
What, Jeremy?
Chair, I had my light on for some time.
Sorry, I didn't realise that.
It's okay. I was going to say we also have to be sensible about this, and I think we are in danger of, if I go back to my VAR analysis, we are asking to kick this upstairs from the referees on the pitch to the VAR office to look at it. They have to look at it and determine, and then we have to more or less accept what they come up with as their map. Russell, can we have one meeting in the meeting, please?
Excuse
I can't
me.
hear.
Excuse me, can we...
Thank you.
Yes, have one meeting, thank you.
So to continue the analogy, we then have to trust what the VAR comes up with, whether we like it or whether we don't like it. I do not understand why... I understand the importance of this measure. We have to get it right. So it goes up to VAR for a check to see if there is a clear and obvious error, to use the jargon. But it can't come back and then we decide whether they do something, because we look at all of these pieces of information and data we are given by them. We cannot go round and measure room sizes. I've been part of this committee where we've argued whether it is 10.01 or 10.0 without measuring it, and it just gets silly. So I would have made in my comment before we got to proposals to have said, I think it needs to be checked. I think it's a fair comment. But it's going to be an absolute. I don't know what the committee is going to come back and see. So my question would have been, is it something that we can proceed to a decision on the basis of a condition? That if it is X, then we will do Y. But if it is not X, then we will do something else.
My initial thought on that is that because this has become a really significant point that we focused on, what we haven't done is looked at other areas. And I would like personally to do more explanation on, for example, the uniqueness of the parking situation there, and the fact that this may well that this is nudging the 10% on HMOs in an area like that, I think makes a difference. But I held back on that discussion because of this technicality. So personally, I would prefer that it was deferred. But that is my opinion, and I will get a vote. I mean, do you want to make that alternative proposal? I mean, I don't know whether we can even. I'd have to take advice on whether that's what we wait for.
That was my question.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, you can't do if some buts and so on. There's one decision to take on the application.
Thank you. My question is answered.
Okay. All right then. So should we go with the original Councillor Vernon Jackson?
Can I just make sure that we are deferring this about a technicality? It does not then close off any other discussions or things. I just want to make sure that we are minuted and clear that this is just a pause for a technical thing, and that we can then have the proper debate at the next meeting.
Yes.
Is that so?
Because that was what the point
Thank
that
you.
I made. Yes, exactly that. Okay, so therefore we have this proposal in front of us. All those in favour of deferring this to the next cycle? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Against? Abstaining? 1. Thank you. The next agenda item, as detailed on the SMAT, has actually... and then I'm going to do a break. Oh, hang on.
I'm ever so sorry. I should have said this at the start and I completely forgot. I've got a very important call at 1 o'clock with a resident. If we have a break now and then I definitely won't be able to partake in the next bit. So I'm going to leave the room for the next bit and then I'll come in for the next agenda item after that. All right? Thank you.
Okay. So I was just going to clarify that item 6, which is 186 Fawcett Road, as detailed in the SMAT, is due to significant concerns over the extent of the disparity between the submitted plans and the works undertaken on site and the lack of accuracy in the proposed plans. It's recommended that the application be withdrawn from the agenda. So I'm assuming we will take officers' advice on that, in which case the next agenda item is item 7, and I suggest that we have a break. And I'm suggesting we're realistic about that break. and we don't do 5 minutes, should we come back at 1 o'clock, which gives us 20 minutes? Or are we happy to do that? Or do we want quarter of an hour?
I was just wondering if Councillor Simpson has to be off at 1. Is there any chance this one would be completed by 1 o'clock, and therefore we could delay? Simpson, no, I'm sorry, I get you and Russell confused all the time. You'll only get worried if I mix you up with Emily.
I think either way, we're not going to get through all of them. So I think Councillor Stanley is going to miss at least one. And so therefore, I think we need a break. Do we want to just do quarter of an hour and come back? Okay, so let's say it's 22. So ready to start again at 5, 2, 1.
And Chair, are we going to do item 7 next or item 8, because we do have a member of the public?
Yeah, and I was going to suggest swapping that around. Okay, cool. All right then. Have a good break. See you in quarter of an hour.
Afternoon, everybody. So I'm just standing in for our chair for the next couple of sessions because she's doing a deputation. So actually we're going to go to 38 Manners Road first because Alex is here and you let him go. Is that all right with everybody? 38 Manners Road. So over to the presentation from David or Simon? Simon. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. 38 Manners Road, change of use from a 5-bedroom house in multiple occupation, Class C4, to an 8-bedroom, 8-person house in multiple occupation, sui generis. This application is in Central Southsea Ward. It's come to the committee because of the numbers of objections at 12. So I think we have Councillor Horton who will make a deputation shortly and the applicant here. And we have some supplementary matters as well I'll take you through in a moment. This involves an increase of 3 persons. Although it has the C4 use, the actual occupancy has been 5 persons. And so the increase in occupancy proposed is effectively 3. In this instance, officers consider that to be a material change of use. That is why you have a planning application in front of you, not the debate about 1 or 2 people and whether or not that needs consent. We're quite clear this one needs consent, and so it has a standard recommendation at the end with conditions. Just to clarify that for you. So there is the application property, terrace property on Manners Road that runs east to west. So Fawcett Road, the Fawcett Road Local Centre is just out of shot on the left-hand side. You can just about, well, you can see the properties that front Fawcett Road, and we're quite far north on Fawcett Road, so the Fratton roundabout and the station is just up to the north there. There's a wide lane called Manners Lane at the back, one of those wider alleyways. You can get a car down actually. There's the application property. They all have big outbuildings at the rear that front on to Manners Lane. There's the front of the application property where you can see bins on the front, space for bins, existing and proposed. With respect to the mixed and balanced communities, this area is already above the 10%, and there will be no change because it's an HMO already. We're talking about an increase of occupancy rather than a change of use to an HMO that isn't. So the percentages would remain as existing at 22.8%. So that takes us back to the policy PLP 20.2 in the emerging local plan that we're seeing most weeks now at committee the last few months, which seeks to refuse increases of occupancy in an area that's already above the 10%. That's in the emerging local plan because it's not adopted policy yet, and there are objections against the policy that will be heard at the local plan examination this autumn. It doesn't have full weight yet. Balanced against that is the housing land supply argument, where we are short for that, the 5-year housing land supply, and that has to be given weight. In officers' opinion, the balance is in favour of granting the application. Members will make up their mind with respect to PLP 20.2. Existing floor plans, fairly traditional layout, and elevations as well. The property would be extended with a replacement rear, ground floor, permitted development extension, and the fairly standard large roof rear extensions over the rear wing and the body of the house with roof lights to the front. So with respect to the internal arrangements proposed, all the bedrooms are just over 10 square metres, which means the combined living space can be at the lower size of 22.5. This one is 29.65, so it's well clear of the minimum size. and that is the arrangement at the rear. Otherwise, the property has mostly shared bathrooms. There's a shed, or shower rooms, I should say. There's a shared shower room on the ground floor and a communal WC. Then a second shared shower room on the first floor. That already meets your standard SPD for the amount of bathrooms and WCs. So, and above and beyond that, there's another shared loo and an ensuite for bedroom 5, and another shared loo on the top. Sorry, the number 7 is obscuring that slightly. So an over-provision, if I can put it that way, of en-suites and bathrooms and so on. So the standards are met numerically, and then in terms of overall configuration of the rooms and light and outlook, officers are satisfied that would be a suitable arrangement for the 8 occupiers proposed, an increase of 3. There you can see the replacement rear permitted development extension at the ground floor and the roof extension permitted development to the top. Be one of those properties that would be internally refurbished significantly, changing the floor levels. Here it is, partially under conversion still. So this is looking towards the front door, and new bedrooms on the right-hand side, bedrooms 1 and 2 being formed there, up to the stairs. That's the view looking towards the front of the house, bedroom 3. This is the rear communal area under construction. So looking down the garden, what will be French doors, and the side-facing existing bay, and then turning round, looking back towards the front of the house, and you'd exit the room through a door there to get towards the street. And then we've got photographs of each of the rooms which are finished upstairs. Bedroom 4, that's at first floor, looking down the light well. Bedroom 3 is at the front of the property. Bedroom 5 is at the rear of the first floor, looking over, you can see the properties to the rear. Bedroom 6 is at the front of the roof. Bedroom 7 is the middle bedroom, roof level, looking down again to the south there. That's the window. And bedroom 8 is the rear second floor roof bedroom. You can see some of those windows there I've just been showing you. This is the outbuilding that appears to be under reconstruction currently. I think the old one was a bit dilapidated, so they are rebuilding that, presumably also under permitted development. We'll come back to that in a moment with the supplementary matters. And between the new doorway into that outbuilding, you can see the permitted development rear extension, and you can just see that dark aperture are the French doors. Oh, there we are. There we are. Right. So with respect to the supplementary matters, not on here, but we've just had a reply from licensing who confirm it needs a license, and indeed one has been granted from January of last year to January 2030, a 5-year license, just to confirm that. 38 Manners Road, we've got the amended resolution. We need to set that out clearly, that in the event of a consent, they also need to enter into the legal agreement to mitigate for the special protection areas. With apologies, that was missed off. Condition 2, we've had some amended plans to tidy up some drawing errors concerning the back door, first floor window, bedroom 6 ceiling height, annotation, and the bike store, which leads to amendments in the right-hand column for condition 2 and 4, just updating the plan numbers. You've seen the plans updated in front of you on the presentation. And then condition 3, looking at the outbuilding, this should be reworded to reflect the removal of the separate bike store. So they did have, on the plans, was a separate bike store in the rear yard. So it would sit between, we're standing in the outbuilding here, effectively, and the rear yard is between the outbuilding and the ground floor extension there, and in that space was to be a bike store. We thought, well, why don't you use the existing outbuilding and save as much of the outdoor yard for the use by the occupiers? So that's why we've got an amended condition 3, which deals with that, basically. 4 cycles is more than big enough, obviously, for the cycles, so we've asked for some plans just to confirm its exact appearance and floor space and use. That's that text set out for you there. And last but not least, it's in the controlled parking zone MB. It's currently at 85% capacity. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. So next we have deputations, and first we'll take any objections. Susie? No, we'll go for you. Mr. Tominski. Excuse my pronunciation. I'm sure it's diabolical.
It's easier than it looks.
Whatever he said.
Yeah, Chair, members of the committee, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. I apologise if I make any mistakes. I'm more comfortable working at height with a hammer in my hands than I am public speaking. My name is Alex. I'm the owner of 38 Manners Road. I appreciate this application has been brought before committee because of objections. I completely understand them. If I lived nearby, I'd want to know exactly what was proposed as well. What I'm proposing is quality student living, which brings a higher quality of tenants than those previously occupied 38 Manners Road. Up until 2 years ago, I lived in the next road over, Telephone Road, next to a HMO. I liked the energy the students brought to the street. They were respectful if I asked them to keep the noise down, and I often had a better relationship with the students than I did certain other neighbours in the street. Having lived in some poor quality accommodation when I first moved to Portsmouth, I want to make sure the tenants have better options than I did, whilst at the same point being affordable. When I first saw 38 Manners Road, I knew I could make improvements to the tenants' lives, which would then have a knock-on effect for the neighbours. The property was in an unsafe state of repair and, in my opinion, not fit for habitation. I am the custodian of the property, and decisions I have made during the renovations have been based on the longevity and strength to my and the adjoining properties, not speed and cost savings. This isn't just another application for a HMO, it's my opportunity to make a difference. The property has been operating as a lawful HMO for many years, long before Article 4 direction came into force. The principle of HMO use has already been established. The application simply seeks to improve and extend an existing HMO that already serves an important role providing much needed shared accommodation. As the officer's report confirms, it does not increase the concentration of HMOs within the area because the property is already one. This is a much more sustainable approach than continually converting additional family homes into HMOs. I know from my personal experience that there is a demand for shared accommodation in Portsmouth. If that demand can be met by improving and extending existing HMOs that are capable of providing high quality accommodation, it reduces the pressure to convert more family homes elsewhere in the city. In my view, that's better for everyone. This has never been about squeezing as many bedrooms as possible into a building. If it had been, I could have produced a very different layout. Instead, I've invested in creating accommodation that exceeds the council's adopted standards. I've also invested in elements that go above and beyond the standard requirements, including 50mm of soundproofing insulation on party walls and soundproofing plasterboard. All external walls have been boarded with 50mm of Celotex to improve insulation and reduce carbon emissions from heating. With any of the profits from renting the property, I also plan to add renewable energy sources in the future, and I've planned for this by installing an easily adaptable hot water system and doubling up the timbers on the extension to take the weight of solar panels. I've told you that I care about the future tenants. One way of demonstrating this is room sizes. Every bedroom is larger than the minimum size required, and the communal kitchen dining spaces is almost 30 square metres of shared living space, where the council's adopted standard only requires 22.5. I wanted future residents to have somewhere they could comfortably spend time, not simply somewhere to sleep. I've also invested significantly in refurbishing the property because it's not a short-term project for me. I intend to own and manage it for many years after my body is too old for roofing. As a local roofer, I know the value of local businesses. So throughout the refurbishment, I've used local tradespeople and local suppliers wherever possible. This investment hasn't just improved the property itself, it's also supported local businesses and local employment here in Portsmouth. Once the refurbishment is complete, the property will be professionally managed by a local managed agent, ensuring that any issues are dealt with promptly, and that both the property and the tenants are properly looked after. Living just a short distance away, I'll be on hand should anything be needed. I appreciate that some of the concerns you've heard may come from experiences people have had with poorly managed properties elsewhere. I genuinely believe that what determines whether a HMO is a good neighbour isn't simply the number of occupants, it's the quality of the accommodation and the standard of management. I hope that I've already proved myself as a good neighbour in Manners Road, as have helped both adjoining neighbours with their properties, including essential roofing repairs and unblocking a downpipe. I am also helping another neighbour a few doors down with roofing repairs. A well-managed HMO can be a positive part of any neighbourhood, whilst a poorly managed one can cause problems regardless whether it accommodates 5 people or 8. The planning officer has carefully considered the objections that have been raised, consulted the relevant technical officers and recommendations and recommended the application for approval because this complies with the council's planning policies. I hope you agree with the officer and approve in line with this recommendation. I'd simply ask that you judge this application on the facts before you and on the way I intend to own and manage this property. Thank you very much for your time.
Under 6 minutes, very good. So, can we have the opposition person, Susie Horton, Councillor Horton, please?
Thank you, Chair. People on this committee will know that I have no principled objection to HMOs. In fact, I think the strict rules that we have in Portsmouth have driven up the standard. And actually, I thank Alex for his presentation, and I was listening to his aspirations for keeping those standards raised. However, I do have quite a consistent view on the expansion of HMOs in areas where they're significantly more than 10%, and that's a very different thing. So what I want to do is just to take you through a few things that I'd want the committee to consider when making their decision, and I would ask you to refuse planning permission. First of all, to note that the officers acknowledge that a 60% increase of occupancy in this particular property means that planning permission is needed. The emerging local plan, PLP 20, states quite clearly that in areas already in excess of 10% HMOs, that increases the occupancy should only be allowed in exceptional circumstances. This property is situated, as we've heard, with 23.78% HMOs already, and is not adding 1 or even 2 rooms, but it's increasing its size by 60%. This is completely contrary to the direction that the council has clearly communicated is best for its residents, both future tenants as well as neighbours. As we approach the new local plan being adopted in the current months, it feels appropriate for an ever-increasing weight to be given to this policy as we distance ourselves from historic planning appeals that are frequently referenced. Hopefully, those historic decisions that we use will soon be superseded by the new policies like PLP 20. So I respectfully disagree with officers' conclusion about that balanced decision. Whilst roads like Manners Road are they're part of what I call the after the horse was bolted situation. The Article 4 direction does hold its own, but actually, because it can't be applied retrospectively, this needs extra consideration. So a road like this has 54 HMOs in it. It's quite a long road, but that's according to the database. An additional 3 rooms to each of those houses would add 162 rooms to the road, or if they'd started off as a standard HMO, or equivalent to about 40 plus houses. And we quite obviously would not. I'm just giving that as a perspective about the increased impact on amenity. It's not in the spirit of aspiring to a mixed and balanced community. So whilst this proposal we have before us does meet the space standards, it does feel to me like it's another Cram-A-Min. And I note the change in the SMAT about the outdoor area, but I make the point that I've made before, that there's an irony in using your outside space in order to cram more people into it. And we need to demonstrate that the soon-to-be local plan would not support this, and the current use of the HMO is quite enough. I think it's clear that the developer has proceeded at risk. And I do want to make a point, and this is, I'm just going to use my privilege of not being in the chair here, but it does really bother me that we have no material planning reason to make comment on what is happening to these houses, where we're ripping out ceilings and floors, cramming in loads and loads of extra rooms, completely configuring them in such a way that it would be almost impossible for it to return to a family house, unless, of course, you wanted a family house with 10 toilets in it, or 8 toilets, and I feel quite strongly about that point. And it could so easily have been improved at its current HMO status. Anyway, back to proper planning reasons. Just to pull it together, I'm pleased that the officers consider that this would represent a material change in the use of the property, and therefore planning permission is required. I think the 60% increase in occupancy would make a significant difference in the character and the scale of the activities resulting from the proposed use in an area way over the 10% count. It's clearly an overdevelopment internally and a reduction in the outside space without regard for future tenants or local residents, and I would refuse planning permission, citing the weight given to the emerging local plan PLP 20, the impact on amenity in terms of mixed to balanced communities, and finally, and I'm glad that I saw also in the SMAT that the officers had added this, which is what I call the nitrates mitigation condition, which I'm pleased to note has been added. Thank you.
Oh, Justin, thank you. So, where are we now? Questions? Councillor
Inman.
That's it.
Thank you, Chair. Can we just go back to the HMO map again, please? So I've been looking at the HMO database, and number 51 Manners Road and numbers 55 have been marked up as houses, but they're actually HMOs according to the register. So that would add another 2 HMOs onto that, so that 22.8 would actually increase up quite significantly then.
Thank you, Councillor. That may or may not be the case. We'd have to double check against particular properties. I don't think it makes a huge difference to the overall balance, and so you'll still need to reach your...
It would make a difference if we decide that we're going to put more weight against the local plan, because the higher that figure is, the more weight we should be giving the plan. So it does actually affect the figures. So I disagree there, I'm afraid.
Councillor Gerald Vernon Jackson, please.
Thank you. So this is a discussion about how much weight something in the emerging local plan we should take on board. Could you walk us through what the new policy says and the process that we've got to now and the process that we're going to further on, so that we have an idea about what sort of weight the new policy has? Would that be possible?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, I could do it in broad terms. Until the local plan, the emerging local plan is adopted, it doesn't have full weight. But as you go through the process, which is a long process of 3 or more years in total, preparation way back and moving through the consultation phases and so on, it gains weight. There's no exact science to say what weight and how much as a whole, and then also individual policies have different weights depending on whether or not they've got live objections to them. So you've noticed in your reports we say they've all got more weight if there are no objections, but the ones that have an objection have less weight. This is one of those that has slightly less weight because it is got a live objection to the overall HMO policy that will be tested at examination this autumn. So you can't afford it full weight, but there's a debate to be had about how much weight it has as an emerging policy, and to balance that against the 5-year housing land supply, where we are short of the required amount. We have 2.4 years of supply. That means there's a greater presumption in favour of granting housing, or in this case, increase of occupancy of an accommodation, residential accommodation. So it's that balance between an emerging local plan policy without full weight against the positive balance of the housing need, effectively, and housing land supply. As Councillor Horton, I said, the test is we would only allow an intensification of occupation only permitted in exceptional circumstances. So that's the local authority's decision as to whether or not that balance is at exceptional circumstances, ruling in favour of the housing land supply or the policy.
Councillor Brennan-Jackson.
So if this local plan process has taken 3 years and we've got the public inquiry happening in a couple of months, we're really at the right near the end of the process. Is that correct, Simon?
Getting there, yes.
Okay. And can I ask, when the planning inspector has their public inquiry, how soon after that will their report come out that says whether they've accepted our arguments or not?
Thank you. I'm not on the policy team, so I'm not so au fait with the overall arrangement. I think it's some months, because it's a big old examination of a big local plan of lots of evidence and testing. So I think it's well into next year before we would perhaps get the adoption.
And am I correct that at the last council meeting we had a report to say we're starting the next one even before we've concluded this one?
That's right, early preparatory statistical work and so on.
Thank you. Any more questions, Councillor?
Is it possible to get any more colour about what exceptional, what constitutes exceptional? Is it particularly good properties? Is it environmentally sound? Is it coloured blue?
Well, in theory, any material consideration could constitute something that's acceptable, but it needs to be material consideration. In this case, it's very material. The housing land supply, that's at the heart of the MPPF and therefore the local plan, which is why officers feel we're able to say that is an exceptional circumstance.
Any more questions, folks? Move on to comments, please. Councillor Vernon-Jackson.
I think the last thing from Simon there is extremely worrying, because what that says is that the 5-year land supply not being enough because the government have made decisions to knock things out of it is going to trump this policy at every step, because in every occasion the planning officers are going to say that the exceptional circumstances is the land supply, which means that the whole point of the local plan is out the window. And why are we bothering and paying large quantities of money to planning officers to write the local plan, and that the government has decided that we won't be able to scrutinise any of that, and that because nothing will come to committee. It just seems to me ludicrous on every step. But just so that we can test this, I'm going to propose that we refuse planning application on this occasion on the basis that it breaks the policy in the emerging local plan, and that as it's very near the end of that process, we should we need to take significant countenance of that and give it significant weight.
Councillor Inman.
Yes, Chair, thank you. Since we refused 2 HMOs at the last council meeting for exactly this reason. I'm happy to second that proposal.
Thank you. Any more comments or opposition to that? No? Are we ready to take a vote? Oh, sorry.
Chair?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Just to Councillor Vernon-Jackson's comment about worrying that we will always, the housing land supply will always trump the policy. It doesn't always trump it. There's still a balance. It tilts the balance, that's all. It tilts it a bit more in favour, but it doesn't automatically mean everything else is set to one side. There are still judgments to be made. And we make those judgments every day. There's a stronger balance for housing, but there may still be factors of one reason or for another where nevertheless refusal can be justified for an HMO or housing or extension or whatever it may be. Otherwise, if we could just clarify, please, so Councillor Vernon-Jackson has recommended or proposed refusal. Could we just be very clear on the ground? The policy PLP 20, which discusses, well, yes, mixed and balanced communities. Can I just make sure we've got clear reasons for that?
So that the emerging local plan has a policy to try to make sure that we protect balanced communities. This area has already got over double the amount of HMOs that is judged to be the tipping point of being a balanced community, and therefore over-intensification of usage of an existing HMO just makes that position worse, and therefore it would be contrary to the policy in the new emerging local plan. Does that give you enough, Simon?
I'm just concerned about the harm, Chair, in that.
The harm
So
is
you've
a cumulative harm that the emerging local plan is seeking to address and has identified and has been accepted by the council as being a harm, and therefore it is reflected in that policy, and we need to make sure that we recognise that cumulative harm.
David?
Yes, so I'm conscious, obviously, we've previously reported an appeal decision to you where a breach of the emerging plan PLP 20 was used as our reason for refusal, and an appeal was subsequently allowed because the inspector wasn't satisfied that we'd articulated what the harm is. So you have a policy that's intended to control something. So what follows from the harm? So if you have a policy that says we want design that's in character, and we say this design is out of character, we have to go on to say why. So why is the design out of character? Because it's the scale, height, materials, all of those factors that we would normally think of. So the breach of the policy is a breach of the policy. Why is that the harm? That's our meat on the bone that we need to put in front of the inspector.
Councillor Vernon-Jackson.
In which case, can I suggest we use the wording in the emerging local plan that came from the planning department to say why this new policy is needed? Because that enumerates what the harm is that we're trying to stop.
Chair, and perhaps the build to that, I listened to Councillor Horton's deputation about the precedent this is setting. So we're entering into a new era. This is the new plan that is being adopted. And that I was querying about what constituted exceptional. And I'm always conscious in planning that we need to relate it to the particular property. And to be truthful, I see nothing exceptional about this development that would not be something that would be replicated elsewhere. So if it was, for example, some of the co-living things that we have seen in other developments, or there was a fundamentally different thing about this building, I might be more supportable of it, but I think I would build upon Councillor Vernon-Jackson's point that this property does not.
The other thing to point out, Chair, as well, is that this is one of 3 houses which are all next to each other, which are HMOs. So you've got a real, what's the word I'm looking for? Real density in a very small area.
David? Or Simon?
I mean, we're recording the discussion for the purposes of putting this into a reason for refusal. I mean, my advice has to be, I'm not getting at the harm that I think we would need to put in front of an inspector. So that has to be my advice. Thinking of is what flows from. Let's try and expand on this to try and help. What flows from an over-intensification? Is it noise? Is it parking? Is it disturbance? Do we have the evidence? Antisocial behaviour? All of those factors that are alleged against the concentrations of HMOs that are in our SPD, for example. Do we have the reasons to say? Because what worries me on a planning defending the reason side is how do we articulate what we think is flowing from an over-intensification of the HMOs? So this is, I'm not doing this to be difficult. I'm doing this to try and understand what we can put in front of an inspector to articulate the harm.
Councillor Vernon Jackson.
Well, so we have understood that the planning inspector will be here in a couple of months' time. Presumably people in the planning department have been doing work on how to justify this new policy to the planning inspector, and therefore will have produced data to be able to justify the new policy. I would suggest that the same data that we're using to justify this new policy, if we're trying to suggest that we say no to this because of this new policy, is entirely pertinent to this planning application. This is a planning application or an ask that is going to come up to frequently. If there was no justification for the new policy, because of harms produced by over-intensification of HMOs, the planning department would not have put it into the local plan. As they have put it into the local plan, which we have accepted, they will have done so on the basis of data that shows harm. Therefore, let's use that data to justify and support the policy that was put together by the planning department to try to make sure that we have a robust argument for when the planning inspector comes, because sure as eggs is eggs, there will be developers who will come to that public inquiry to argue against it. Now, either we've got data that can support this policy, at which point you've got all of that within the department, or you haven't, in which case we'll roll over and wave our legs in the air and say developers can have what they like. So my hope and presumption is it's the first of those two, and that the policy has been developed, evidenced, and therefore justifiable. And therefore that gives the reasoning that David is hoping for, which rests within your department.
Thank you. David?
Yeah, just to kind of bring it out, perhaps bring it to a conclusion.
Can you come a bit closer to the mic?
Sorry, yes. Yeah, just hopefully to bring it to a conclusion. If we look at, probably haven't got the merging local plan in front of you, so Para 6104 refers to the potential for negative social, environmental and amenity impacts of high concentrations of HMOs on local communities. Is a reference made in the emerging plan. So I would advocate adding that in to a reason for refusal in the circumstances.
Excellent.
Thank you, David. Inman.
Chair, in the actual plan, the emerging plan, it actually says, due to the adverse implications to local amenity, the council will only exceptionally grant planning permission to intensify. So the reason it says it in the local plan is due to adverse implications to the local amenity.
Do we like that, David?
I think we'll draw it. I think it's sensible to draw it to a conclusion on the basis of that, if that's acceptable.
Thank you, everybody. Are we ready to vote? So we have a possible objection, and it's been seconded. Can we vote in favour at the minute, or not?
Including the special protection areas, technical reason as well.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And presumably Susie. Oh, you're not. Any objections against? 4. God, I'll get this right one day. None. So, any abstentions? Unanimous vote, thank you. Sorry, Alex. Next, we're going to go back to 279 Fawcett Road. And who's doing the presentation? Thank you, Simon.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application at 279 Fawcett Road for a certificate of lawful development for an existing use as a 7-bedroom house in multiple occupation. The property has been occupied in the past lawfully by 5 persons, and the increase they're asking about is effectively 2 persons. So as in this instance, that is affected by the blanket call-in of 4 years ago from Councillor Vernon Jackson about the matter of increase in occupancy in the instance where officers feel there's not a material change of use. So this is different to Manners Road just now, where there were 3 extra. Officers agreed it needed planning permission. In this instance, the applicant is applying for confirmation from the local planning authority that an increase of 2 would not result in a material change of use and therefore should be granted a lawful development certificate. So that's the test. Is there a material change of use? The property is on the southern end of Fawcett Road, the quieter end, coming up from Albert Road, heading north there. Opposite the Jewish Cemetery to place you. There is the property. Plans from a previous application. Property not altered at that stage, significantly anyway. You can see the traditional layout there of bedrooms upstairs and the stairs in the middle. Since then, the property has been extended with the rear roof extensions, permitted development shown here, enables the bedroom and the front in the roof space, and then the extra accommodation to the rear. That's already been achieved under permitted development. So here the plans are shown for completeness, but you're not judging the adequacy of the accommodation. To remind you, it is simply whether an increase of 2 persons constitutes a material change of use from the previous 5 to 7. So we take you through the apologies. It came to committee because the blanket call in and at the request of Councillor Horton. I didn't mention that. So the test is not the 50-metre radius and mix and balance of communities. It's not the adequacy of the accommodation or parking. It is whether an increase of 2 persons would constitute a material change of use from the existing that requires planning permission. So in the reports we rehearse how the extra 2 people could be accommodated at the property in terms of comings and goings and bins and so on, and the issue of other cases in recent times. Officers conclude that there would be no material change in use of 2 extra persons, therefore the certificate should be granted. If members were to disagree, they would have to refuse the certificate. Just for completeness, again, just as per the floor plans, that for completeness there is the property with various photographs throughout. In terms of supplementary matters, just that we've had confirmation from private sector housing that it's already been licensed for 7 persons for 5 years, June 2021 to 26, and now again from this year for the next 5 years. Thank you.
Finished, Tom? Finished. All right. We don't have any presenters as such today, apart from yourself. We've got an objector, though. Councillor?
Thank you. I appreciate this is different to the previous one in terms of this is before you is a certificate of lawful development. I do want to make some similar points because I think they're relevant. I actually object to this because I think +2 does make a difference. So interestingly on this one, and maybe the committee can tease this out, if you look at the planning history and you look at why we're looking at a certificate of lawful development for an HMO for a 7-bedroom SUI, the planning history does not indicate that there was ever a change from a C4 to a SUI, unless I have got this completely wrong. So it doesn't look like it was ever granted. So often we have before us +1, +2, +3, +4 on a SUI. Or we have a C4 to a SUI. So this is a curious one to me. It seems to be different because it's like a hop, skip and a jump from a C4 to a SUI, and now a certificate of lawful development is requested. Surely there needs to be planning permission at some point along that route. If you look at the report, it's 2 applications that have been withdrawn, and unless I'm missing something, I feel that this is just by stealth going from a C4 to a SUI, and now we're looking at certificate of lawful development. Because if this isn't the case, what would stop rampant expansion of HMOs with no regard to planning? So maybe if the committee could clarify that, and I'm happy if I'm wrong. But so that brings me to my next point, which is back to the previous deputation that I made around the emerging local plan. And it does state clearly that in areas already in excess of 10% HMOs, that increases in occupancy should only be allowed in exceptional circumstances. And I appreciate you've just rehearsed that. And now I understand why officers have not thought it necessary to include the percentage of HMOs in this area, because we're not looking at a change of use, we're only looking at a certificate of lawful development. I can assure the committee that this property is situated in an area with a very, very high, much above 10%. And adding just 2 rooms, I believe, will make a material difference to the character of the local area and the amenity to both residents and neighbours. This is completely contrary, again, to the direction that the council has clearly communicated is best for its residents in terms of what you've just talked about with the local plan. I can't understand why we'd have that as a policy in the local plan if that didn't have to have increasing weight as we go towards it. And I'll make the point that I made before, there's a cumulative impact of this, because if this is allowed all the time, then the house next door and the house next door, and it makes I know we have to look at every planning application on its own merit, but actually we also have to think of the amenity of the whole area. So I know it meets the space standards. I think the top room might be where that bed was tucked under, might be worth looking at, but I understand that we're just looking at a certificate of lawful development, so that might be not possible. So basically, I think the additional occupants are making a difference in the character, scale of activities and resulting in the proposed use. It's an overdevelopment, and I think increased weight needs to be given to the emerging local plan, PLP 20, the impact on amenity, mixed and balanced community, and the nitrates mitigation. Thank you.
Councillor, do you have any response for Councillor Hartley,
Yes,
please?
Chair, just so we're really clear on what we're determining here. So it's a lawful development certificate application, so it's asking us the question, is it a material change of use to move from 6 occupiers to 8? So, sorry, 5 to 7. My error, my apologies. What's really important to understand, so if we look at the 2.4, the planning history, so the property has planning permission for C4 use granted in 2020. So lawfully, it can be occupied up to 6 occupiers. And that's no act of development takes place in that. So if we go from that lawful position of 6 people in the property to 7, is that, the question we're being asked is that materially different such that it needs planning permission? So that's the only thing we're looking at. Can't consider 10% rules, layouts, sandwiching, any of those issues that are in our planning merit bag. We're not considering planning merit, we're just considering this material change of use issue. So we can only grant or refuse the LDC on the basis of whether it's a material change of use or not. And as we set out in the report, there is a really extensive appeal data now, every single time, without exception, shows that going from 5 or 6 or 7 is not a material change of use.
Thank you. Was it you, Matty? Sorry. Go.
Thank you, Chair. As David's just said, it's only an increase of 1, really. It does say 2, but it's an increase of 1. But it's not just an increase of 1. You're taking a C4, a small HMO, into a whole new category of sui generis, which is a large HMO. So I do believe that it's a material change of use.
Councillor?
Can I just ask how we can go from to 7 people without planning permission? Because I'm just looking at the planning permission here that was granted back in 2021, and it clearly states it was for 3 to 6 people, and now we're being asked to decide on 7, but we haven't got planning permission for 7.
David? Simon, sorry.
Indeed, correct. I mean, they were trying to, as you can see from the 2.5 and 2.6 paragraphs, they were trying to establish different factors back in 2021 and 22, and they were withdrawn for whatever reasons. So they're back again here now, trying to regularise matters and establish the 7 people.
So this certificate of lawfulness then is planning, will give them the planning they would require, was that correct?
Well, it would give them the ability, if this is granted, the ability to occupy it with 7 persons.
But we don't have planning for it, though.
Well, this is instead of applying for planning permission. If you believe something to be lawful and it doesn't require planning permission, that's the way you can go. For example, domestic extension is a typical thing. Some people you don't apply at all because they know it's permitted development, or they believe it to be permitted development, or they can choose to gain a lawful development certificate, or you can even go overboard and apply for planning permission for it. In this instance, they are arguing that they believe it's lawful because there's no material change of use in their opinion. Officers happen to agree with that. You may reach your own decision on that.
Any more questions? Councillor Vernon Jackson.
So some of the planning history starts in 2020 when they already had planning permission to be an HMO, but they asked to have the permission to be both an HMO and a private house to have some flexibility. Do we know when they had planning permission to become an HMO?
Well, yeah. In 2020, when we received the application, they were applying from C4 to a mixed C3, C4.
Yeah.
So at that point, when there's no previous planning history, you see these occasionally, we want to make sure that their premise that it's coming from an existing C4, is that correct? If there's no lawful development certificate or no planning consent predating that, when they apply like this, saying we think it's C4 already and we'd like a flexible mixed C3, C4. We then test that to make sure we're happy with that proposition. If we're not, we return the application as invalid or refuse it. In this instance, they were able to supply assured tenancy agreements, short-hold tenancy agreements and council tax information back to before the Article 4 in 2011. So when we received that application in 2020, it was an informal judgment as opposed to a lawful development certificate, an informal judgment that yes, indeed, it is already C4. So we were able to proceed with that application on the basis that it was C4 to what they wanted, C3, C4. Hopefully answer your question.
Yeah, so, okay, so when the Article 4 directive came in 2011 to say that we had limits on HMOs, before then people didn't have to have permission to have an HMO, you just did it, which is what happens in Fareham, Gosport, Havant, etc. still. But after that, people had to have permission. But if they already were operating as an HMO and they could prove that they were doing it before 2011, they could then continue as an HMO. Is that right?
That's right. They proved they were before the Article 4 and continuing afterwards.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Any more questions, please? If not, we'll move on to comments. Councillor Vernon Jackson.
Well, it seems to me we are bound by the previous decision that we've just done, that an over-intensification, that if the policy has legs, over-intensification is something that the new local plan says that we should resist, except in exceptional circumstances. This is clearly not exceptional circumstances. I'm very worried that the licensing department didn't talk to the planning department to say, look, this is going from 5 to 7, oh, we've licensed it for 6, because they've effectively given it a green light for 6 years. But I think that's, again, an issue that we need to take up with the licensing department about why they don't communicate. But it seems to me that the emerging local plan is absolutely clear that we don't do intensifications unless there is an exceptional circumstance. The suggestion that the exceptional circumstance is the lack of land supply, which is by nature not exceptional, it is on everything. Therefore, it cannot therefore be considered exceptional. Therefore, the emerging local plan is absolutely plain, clear and simple that we do not allow intensification of use, and therefore we have absolutely no grounds for discretion on this. This is an absolutely open and shut case of having to say no, unless we are choosing to ignore the policies produced by the planning department.
Chair, if possible, if I could come back. What the committee need to turn their mind to in determining the application solely is whether it's a material change of use. So we're not invoking policies previously given that advice, so we're not utilising our policies, our previous SPD guidance. The only question we're being asked is it material if there are additional occupiers in the property? Does that cause a material change of use that needs planning permission? So if we issue a decision which refers to either existing merging policies, the SPD, that's entirely flawed because that's not what we're considering. We're only considering whether it's materially different and such that that requires planning permission. And as previously said, all existing appeal decisions where we've tried to argue this have failed.
Councillor Cordy.
Thank you, Chair. I believe that changing a HMO from a C4, a small HMO, to a sui generis large HMO is indeed a material change of use, and I believe it would require planning permission, so I'd like to propose that.
Thank you, Councillor. Got a proposition? Have we got a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Inman. No?
I was going to comment. I mean, I think we are where we are based on the discussions we had last time, and I'm very concerned about this relationship now between the importance of the local plan and the national law. I mean, I don't see. So in fact, I'm going to be silent because I'm simply going to be happy to support the proposer and the seconder.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Stanton, you can't take a vote on this. Is that okay? Because you haven't been throughout. Go on.
Thank
Simon?
you. So, thank you. So we're already clear that it's the sole matter, as David has said, and I've said, is whether or not there's a material change of use. Councillor Cordy believes there is, and that's been seconded by Councillor Vernon Jackson. That's fine. Can we just, again, a bit like last time?
Councillor Inman seconded it.
And Councillor Inman, I do apologise. On what basis can we play? In the report we've rehearsed whether or not one or two extra persons causes extra bin storage, parking, comings and goings, antisocial behaviour. Can we just provide that next reason as to why that change of use you think is material?
Yes, of course. The shift from a C4 to a sui generis constitutes a material change of use because it legally removes the property from the standard use class system and will have an impact on local infrastructure, parking, noise and waste management.
Thank you. Are we ready to take a vote, folks? So we're against this. We've got a proposition. Can we have a show of hands, please, against? Unanimous? Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Councillor Vallely, for chairing those two items when I stepped out of the chair. It's probably worth, just for clarification, noting that Councillor Joe Standard was also absent for those two items as he had to deal with other matters, but he is now back in the room, back on the committee. Okay, we have two further ones. Item 9. I've got it at 7, but I think it's... Here we go. Item 9, which is 85 Highbury Grove, the retention of the boundary wall. And I think David's presenting this.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, as you've described, so this is an application, retrospective application for retention of boundary wall at 85 Highbury Grove. It's on their side boundary fronting Pittreevy Road. So you can see the property there, corner and terrace property, and the wall, there's an existing 1.8 plus wall along the side elevation along Pittreevy Road, and they've extended that, and it requires planning permission because any wall that's over a metre high adjacent to the highway boundary needs planning permission. You can go up to a metre. Next to the highway, you can go up to 2 metres where you're not adjacent to the highway. And the application comes to you due to the number of objections received. So the pattern of development in the properties, there is a block of 4 garages to the north of the property, one of which is number 85s and then links on to number 87s, and then the 2 properties to the north. And so what the planning application has done, if we just move on, is extended the boundary wall so it encloses the area in front of their garage. The garage has been obviously remodelled and mended and the roof replaced on it, as you'll see from the photos. Those works don't need planning permission, so we're only considering the boundary wall part. So this is the section of wall which now requires planning consent due to its height and its proximity to the highway, and you'll be able to see the pictures of that coming up as built. So this is as built. So on your left, you're seeing the block of 4 garages. The flat roofed with the unpainted render is the application site garage, and they've enclosed that space in front of their drive. The concern raised by a neighbour and looked at by your highways officer is in relation to the use of the adjacent garage, because obviously there's now a high wall in front of it. We've considered that in terms of highway safety terms and taken the views from your highways officer, and they're content with that in terms of purely in highway safety terms, because that relationship exists in lots of the garages within the estate where there's a high boundary wall immediately adjacent to the garage. If we just move on, this is unfortunately come out rather dark on the screen, but just going back through what was previously there. So originally the properties all have brick boundary walls. At some point, more than 4 years ago, the wall was slightly extended and painted grey, which is not something that we could control. And now the additional part of the wall has just enclosed that space in front of the garage. If we, that's it, yeah, thanks, Simon. We accept that the wall's no thing of beauty in the circumstances. We don't, bearing in mind the pattern of development has these heights of boundary walls and they're common along the estate, we feel on balance that we don't have a strong enough reason to refuse the application purely in terms of its appearance or the character of the area. And so that's why the application is recommended for approval, Chair.
Thank you. There are no deputations on this matter. So questions for officers? I'm going to jump in with one quickly. I note that one of the objections was talking about a loss of parking. Is that relevant in terms of our planning decision, and on what basis will that be?
Yes, it's a material consideration. The balance would have to be at maximum you would lose 1 space if you use that garage regularly. I don't believe there'd be sufficient space to park in front of the forecourt because you'd be obstructing the pavement. So that's potentially a material consideration. The significance of that in terms of the harm overall, we would argue it's limited and wouldn't constitute an overriding reason to refuse. But you may view differently.
Councillor Stanton.
Sorry, could I just go back to the photo of the garages, please? So there and the new one. So just comparing that to the... So yeah. So those other 2 garages, that one in the centre, I assume that is a garage that extends past the 2 either side and is one of the other houses next door. Is it their garage?
It's the same depth, but because of the layout, if you just get to the OS, so if you look at the back of that, it's the same depth, but I presume that there is, I don't know, but I presume there is a back door which allows you to get through there.
So with regards to that, the bit of the drop curb, if we go back to the new bit, so that bit with all the grass on it out the front of the garages there, because I know obviously the garages will be owned by those properties. Who actually owns that strip of land in front of those garages? Because they've built this wall on that bit of land. So is that owned, each bit of land outside that garage, is it owned by the household? Because otherwise they've just plonked that wall on a bit of land that might not necessarily be theirs.
No, I mean, that's my understanding is that they would both own, because it's not part of the public highway because you've got the pavement and the road in between. So yes, they would own that, in effect, that sort of pull-in forecourt area as well. So if you look at the plan, they've highlighted it all in red as being their ownership, and we would interpret that as being the whole of their curtilage of their property. So yes, I would expect that it's going to be number 87, isn't it? Number 87's red line would in fact have a dog leg to take in the garage and the part in front of it.
Okay. I mean, effectively, if they own that land, then that's fair enough. The only thing I do worry though is for the garages in the middle. If the house at the back then decides to do this, their access to those garages is going to become incredibly narrow.
It's a good point. Actually, I think if you move on, Simon, funnily enough, if you keep going, there's a further set of photos. So on the opposite side of the road, for some reason, there are only blocks of 2 garages, and then they both have high walls directly adjacent. So we put these in just to show that it's part of the pattern of development, funnily enough, that there is these high walls directly adjacent to garages across the estate. So directly opposite, you've got that same relationship, which is one of the reasons why the highways officer didn't object, because he could see that lots of the garages have those high walls next to them.
Okay, brilliant. No, that's fine. I mean, if it's their land, it's their land, and that's fine.
Any other questions? Councillor Vernon Jackson.
When this was a garage, although we have to be honest about this, in Portsmouth, not many garages contained cars, but it did have a dropped curb outside. Now there is a wall, there is no need for a dropped curb, but I think you're not meant to park over a dropped curb. Therefore, it would be logical for that dropped curb to go so that you add a bit of a space. I'm sure that the Cabinet Member for Transport will take this up, but are we able to put this in as a planning condition that that drop curb is taken up to a higher thing?
That's an interesting question, and my question would actually not whether highways could take out the drop curb and put it in, but can that be part of the condition for it to be at the cost of the person? Is that what you're saying? Because I believe that's happened in where a previous garage was converted into a house in Delamere Road, and I followed it up, and actually it was in the conditions, and the developer had forgotten. Yeah, can that be done?
Yes, is a short answer. Yeah, and as a planning reason, you could extinguish the access if it's no longer needed.
And that deals with the previous worry about a loss of parking space, doesn't it? Okay, I think that's a really sensible condition. Any other questions or comments?
No, Gerald was looking to me as Cabinet Member to Transport whether I can answer this question, and it's above my level of understanding to answer it, because there are also issues relating to the turnability and the angles of getting into the drop zone. So my logic would be that, in fact, I don't know that I know my logic, but I know there's a question that needs to be asked here, because if it were to be the case, using your Delamere example, that the drop curb was extinguished and there was a cost to redo that, that would, I think, be at the cost to the person. But what I don't know is what the implication of putting that back would be about the middle garage, because there's a turning circle thing. So I think there's a question to be asked there.
But the logic says that when that was a garage, the drop curb was at a place so that they could turn, and all you're doing is moving it one garage width further, and it would have the same design. So I'm sure it's doable.
I don't know, because have they given up their... You are, I suspect, right that the garages are not being used for putting cars in. Yeah, many of them are too small for that to be done on modern cars. But that's a separate, whole separate issue. Have they given up their right to put a car in the garage?
I think we're at cross purposes. I'm suggesting that only where the new wall is does they have a proper size curb, and the access to all the other garages remains as it is, so they can be used.
That's how I interpreted it. Okay. Any other questions or comments? proposals?
That amendment, I'm happy to propose officer's recommendation. Does that work, Simon, David?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can I second, please?
Seconded by Councillor Valley. All those in favour of giving conditional permission? Unanimous, which is now 7? 7 of us. Back to 7. Thank you. We'll move swiftly on to the last agenda item 10, which is 73 Grant Road, demolition of existing garage, etc., etc. I believe it's here because there's a relation with a member of staff or something, the applicant. Simon, are you doing this one? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. An application at 73 Grant Road, Drayton and Farlington Ward for the demolition of an existing garage, construction of a single-storey side and rear extension, construction of a hip to gable roof enlargement, and dormers to the front and rear roof slopes. That's right, Councillor, it's come to committee purely because one of the applicants is a PCC employee. So we're up on the hill, Portsdown Hill. The Portsmouth Water covered reservoir is just further to the north, and this area of land running north-south contains some of their infrastructure, which is why it's not developed. There is the application site, one half of a pair of semis. There we are. That's the Portsmouth Water land to the one side. Originally a pair of matching semis. It's hard to see here, but the hip on the neighbour has been changed into a gable, and they've inserted that front dormer. As you can see, the proposal would even that up on the front. You'll see in a moment. Some of this hedge would need to be removed in order to make for this side extension. So that's the existing elevation you've just seen, and next door's been ghosted in there, but you can see the full gable on it. So sticking with the front elevation, there's the new dormer proposed that would match more or less next doors, and going from the hip to a gable again. So it would rebalance the pair of semis as it happens, change from the original balance to a new balance. The new extension to the side wraps around to the rear, so there it is. It's set well back from the front elevation and turns into, with a little pitched roof, turns into a flat roof to the round to the rear, and that's the rear elevation facing north up the hill. And then to the rear there's also a large rear dormer window as well. So in terms of the floor plans, just a comparison between the existing on the top half and the proposed on the bottom half. So you can see the wrap-around L-shaped extension here with the sort of store here, garage stroke store, and then the extended living area towards the rear, the big roof light, and then the rear dormer and the front dormer allow for full use of the enlarged roof space compared to the existing, where there is none. Just that's a more same thing in more detail. It's a thumbnail sketch of the wider street scene. There you can see the newly balanced property. Just some 3D views. Of course, you struggle to get that from street view. You wouldn't. Yeah, so there we are. And just a bit more context of the wider street scene and other houses. So you'd see now a matching dormer, matching hip to gable, and the extension to the rear, quite large, but next door already has its own extension, so it would not extend far behind it. So no adverse impact on that neighbour, and indeed there are no objections. So it's purely become because of the identity of a member of staff being one of the applicants.
Thank you. Any questions? Any comments or proposals? Councillor Vernon Jackson.
Happy to propose the recommendation.
Seconded by Councillor Valley. All those in favour? Unanimous. 7 of us. Thank you very much. Don't run away yet. We have the delight of an update, which we've requested to come here.
Yeah, I'll keep it brief. There's a couple of appeal decisions
Appeals.
to report, Chair. Base decisions made under delegated authority. So we'll just get the presentation up. Just very brief on these. So the first one was a scheme at 31 Cornwall Road, so it's in Fratton, and it was to add floors to two parts of an existing building. You'll see in a minute, one wing is 2-storey, one wing is 3-storey already, add a floor to each. If we could just move on to the next one. So on the left, you can see it's the lighter red brick property, so not the flat roof property at the far left of it. So it's that three-storey element there, and then the lower 2-storey element to the front of the view from street view. And the proposal was to, it is only one extra storey in each. It looks like it's hugely increasing it, doesn't it, when you look at it as a flat elevation. But it was an extra storey on the 3-storey element, and then an extra storey on the 2-storey element, and that would create two one-bed flats. Our concern, can you just go back? Our concern principally on this was the relationship with the properties immediately to the north. So that is 2 and 4, and I've forgotten the reference number. I've forgotten the addresses. Incorrect, yeah. I've entirely forgotten the addresses. I apologise. So we were concerned that increase in bulk adversely impacting on their living conditions in terms of being overbearing, loss of light, etc. Now the applicant, if you just move on, the applicant had done shadow analysis, but it was pretty poor. I think was the short answer. It only really looked at one impact. The inspector agreed with us that he didn't feel that they didn't feel it was adequate in this instance, and we needed more information about that shadowing. He didn't have that form, so he agreed with us about the concern and also about the impact on their outlook and living conditions due to that. The proximity right up against their gardens, really high, bulky, affecting their lighter outlook and being overbearing. Found the impact on the character was okay, and then applying the tilted balance in that particular instance, they didn't feel like the benefits of the 2 additional flats overweighed those negative impacts to those nearby neighbours. So quite a tight site, really difficult to deliver additional units on those sites, and in this particular instance, yeah, they hadn't quite got the balance correct. And just the second one, so this was for creation of an access, 34 Clarendon Road. Property lies within a conservation area, and whilst the access itself was safe in terms of highway safety grounds, our concern was about the wholesale ripping out of the front boundary to create the parking spot there. This followed on from a similar decision we had at Wilson Grove, similar reasoning from the inspector. Although a more modern property within the conservation area, they still found that the front boundaries, that sense of enclosure was a key kind of aspect of the character of the area, and then by ripping that out with the hedge and the wall and creating the parking space, that would erode that sense of enclosure. So there's some harm there. What would be the benefits? So the benefits obviously is a parking space for the applicant. Notwithstanding that, that benefit's very much a private benefit, and also we would lose on space, on street parking capability as well. So there wasn't really a huge benefit beyond to the applicant themselves, and they felt that overall the harm to the conservation area trumped the parking provision.
Thank you. Councillor Bellinger.
David, if that wasn't in a conservation area, David, would that have been the same decision, or would it have been a different decision?
Potentially, so it all depends on whether the access is onto a classified road or not, about whether it needs consent anyway. Beyond that, I don't think it would even need planning permission, removing the front boundary, as long as the surface created was porous or drained within the property. Potentially an access is normally PV.
So if it's not on an A, B or C road, You can just do it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any other? Is that it, David? Thank you. Councillor Vernon Jackson.
Could I make a suggestion?
Mm-hmm.
As we are all here and in possession of our diaries,
Mm-hmm.
would it not be a good idea to see if we can find a time that works for all of us and our colleagues behind to look at that data in terms of Gladys Avenue, so that we don't have to run round between masses of us and emails?
Okay, we'll wait till after the meeting.
Okay, fine. Sorry, yeah.
We'll just and we'll wrap the meeting up. So thank you, everyone. I think we're challenging full council for the length of these meetings now, and also whoever proposed and seconded the minutes. Did you sign them already? No. Don't run away before you do that. So we'll draw this meeting to a close. Thank you, everyone on the committee, for your comments and suggestions today.